Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana was married to Michael. For 5 years, they had lived in a private home with Michael's parents and had made a separate entrance in one half of the house. Adriana had a daughter from her first marriage. The girl studied at a technical school in another city and came to her mother on weekends. In a joint marriage, Adriana gave Michael a daughter, and now they were expecting a son. The couple would have been quite happy if not for the mother-in-law. She drove her daughter-in-law out of the light, and if not directly in the face, did not say nasty things, then looked unkindly. And she was always unhappy with everything. What Adriana would not make everything bad. The daughter-in-law tried to meet her as little as possible, but when you live near her, it is quite difficult to do so. Adriana went out into the yard where she had flowers growing. She had planted them herself, watered them, tended them. The flower was very beautiful along the edge of roses, fragrant, white, and in the center of the bright balls were bushes of white, yellow, and burgundy dwarf chrysanthemums. Completed the composition, and in the fall flowers. Indian summer. Adriana also had bushes of peonies. A bed with tulips all required care and watering. Adriana loved messing around with the plants and the soil. It was as if she felt they were saying something. Now the chrysanthemums are thirsty. They need watering. Her husband made fun of her for it. So Adriana preferred not to let him in on her conversations with the flowers. She listened and got an answer. She did what she thought the flowers wanted her to do. Michael worked as a truck driver. He often had long trips. From his business trips, he brought his girls many different gifts and sweets. The eldest called him Daddy and always obeyed him. Today, Michael had to return from another business trip. It lasted more than 2 weeks. During this time, the eldest daughter almost passed the session at the technical school. The youngest had lost 2 teeth. The baby in Adriana's belly began to move, and the chrysanthemums in the flower loomed. Adriana made 2 trips to the antenatal clinic and had an ultrasound. The doctor confirmed that she was having a boy. However, Michael and Adriana were sure of this even before all the tests and ultrasounds. The genetic analysis was good. Adriana was scared to death of all kinds of abnormalities and syndromes. Her friend had a daughter born with Down syndrome, not burdened with pathology. So the child was without any other abnormalities, but one syndrome was enough with a head. The girl at the age of 5 did not speak only separate syllables, but was very affectionate and madly loved to sing and dance. A friend was constantly engaged with her, went to different rehabilitation centers. But the development was very slow. The doctors insisted on me Daisy, and Adriana reluctantly agreed. I was afraid that a long needle would damage the dense eggs, but everything went well, and the result of the analysis was also good. Mother-in-law went out into the yard. Remove your flower from here. I will plant potatoes in this place. It's September. What potato planting? Adriana asked. 6 months will pass quickly, so that by spring there will be nothing. Do you hear? Adriana answered her nothing and went into the house. Michael's parents' house was old and dark. It smelled like a net. Their part of Michael Adriana had renovated with their own hands, and it was the complete opposite of bright and clean. They'd insulated the walls, made a separate entrance from the street. Michael knew his parents, their tolerable character. They only accepted their granddaughters normally. Adriana was disliked in every possible way. And from the moment she arrived at the house, Michael brought Adriana with Betty and introduced her to his parents. Mom, this is my wife Adriana, her daughter Betty. We'll be living with you until we get our own place built. Hopefully that will be soon. Son, you see we don't have much room. And you brought a girl with a tail. She's not a girl, she's my wife. And I'm gonna ask you to treat her with respect. You don't have to love her, but as my wife, yes. Michael's voice has a metallic tone to it. Come on, we're not gonna hurt your precious wife. Calm down. Come on, live. The mother-in-law shook her lips unhappily. A year later, Betty was born. Her mother-in-law was very fond of her. taking care of her. Adriana thought she'd start treating her better. But no, it was as if her mother-in-law either didn't notice or constantly made remarks. Picked on the child. Looking the wrong way. Milk low fat. Milk high fat. Milk high fat. Milk low fat. Adriana tried to ask why she disliked her. The mother-in-law was silent at first, and then she said, "Why should I love you? I dreamed that my son married a girl, that all the children would be common. But he married a woman with a child. So he'll raise someone else's child. So what's your problem with Betty? She lives in the dormitory. She's rarely here. When she graduates, she'll get a job. To her part. Where's her father? Does he even pay child support? He does, but it's a pittance. He takes jobs like this on purpose. It looks like they pay, but it's a pittance. Why did you get divorced? He started drinking and raising his hand against me, so he had a reason to. A good wife's husband wouldn't drink. You've got him and my Michael down, you see. Why did you do that? I tried to keep our family together, but he drank before me. And now he's gone off the rails. I said everything. My mother-in-law turned her back and walked out. Adriana closed the door to her room and burst into tears. So much time she tried to melt the icy heart of this woman. But it was all in vain. Nothing worked on her mother-in-law. Adriana felt something aching in her chest. She was very upset. She wanted so much to be loved and accepted by her husband's family. What else she needed to do to make that happen, she had no idea. Adriana had been an obedient girl all her childhood. Didn't mom and dad get upset? She loved to draw and make various crafts. She could spend hours watching butterflies and goats. In the fall, she would collect leaves and listen to them. When Adriana was 5 years old, her mother died of cancer. Since then, the girl as a substitute began to be rude to elders, to do everything out of spite. But she was only expressing her strong emotions. She didn't know any other way. Her father punished her for it, and once even hit her. And then Adriana realized that no one would ever love her again, and she withdrew into herself. After a while, her father brought her stepmother into the house. She already had a little girl of her own. Adriana was 8 years old then, and the stepmother's daughter was 2 years old. The little girl received all the love, and Adriana as if not noticed. Everything beautiful and new to little Adriana. But things from the neighbor kids were given to her. Toys were never given to her. And when she tried to play with her stepsister's dolls, she was yelled at for taking away her toys. Adriana learned to read early. She read a lot and a variety of literature. She especially liked historical novels. She imagined herself their heroine, put on fancy dresses, rode in gilded carriages drawn by water horses, danced at balls, and fell in love with princes. In these stories, Adriana was loved. She was admired. Poems were dedicated to her. When she had done her homework, she would take the next book brought from the library and read into the night. The librarians noticed the active young reader and kept new and interesting books especially for her. Adriana had good taste and a musical ear. At school, she loved singing lessons, sang along to the radio, liked to watch song contests, and kept her own songbook where she wrote down the lyrics of her favorite songs. After school, Adriana tried to enter the University of Economics at the Faculty of Goods Introduction. But she did not have enough passing scores. She had to take the documents and take them to the technical school for an accountant. There, Adriana was accepted. She was looking forward to the moment when she could go to the dormitory. Summer passed quickly, and now her father loaded the girl's belongings into the car and brought Adriana to the technical school. He took a bag out of the trunk. He said goodbye, got into the car, and drove away. A new life awaited her. She liked it at the technical school, and it was not very difficult to study. Soon Adriana started to receive an increased scholarship. She spent it mainly on books, paper, and pencils with colors. At once she became an active reader of the library of the technical school. The girls from the group were not particularly eager to communicate with those who lived in the dormitory. They considered themselves better dormitory because they themselves are urban. Therefore, those who lived in the dormitory created their own social circle. Adriana of all socialized only with Kathy from a dysfunctional family. Kathy's mother and father drank and paid no attention to the children. Kathy was not moderately developed, smoked, liked to drink beer and go out with boys from the neighboring technical school. The girls lived in the same room. Adriana liked that Kathy was simple and easy to communicate with. That's why she had a lot of friends and acquaintances. She could find contact with anyone. One day, two young men from the Radio Communications College appeared in their company. Ethan and Benjamin, as they called themselves, were already graduates. The guys invited the girls to the movies, walked around town with them, bought treats, bought beer and cigarettes, Adriana lemonade and candy. Adriana didn't like the taste, the beer and cigarettes. She never learned to smoke, although Kathy showed her how to inhale smoke. Ethan immediately turned his attention to Adriana, a tall, dark-haired girl with brown eyes and a charming smile. She was immediately attracted by her bright appearance. Adriana was not a talker, but Ethan even liked it. He could talk for hours about something interesting. Adriana just listened. She was a good listener. She asked questions. If she didn't understand, she would ask what she was interested in. That's how they spent their time in the evenings, walking and talking. During the day, they both studied. Ethan was in his senior year. Adriana was finishing her third. There was only occasional time. They never quarreled in the evenings, and there seemed to be complete understanding between them. Adriana liked Ethan. She found it easy and pleasant to spend time with him. Gradually, a slight infatuation turned into a crush. Ethan and Adriana began to meet more often. They stood outside the girls' dormitory for long periods of time. At the end of May, it was Kathy's birthday. Almost all the dorm mates had already left for the vacations. Adriana and Kathy had their last practical classes, and they had 2 days to study. Kathy approached Adriana. "I want to have my birthday party tonight. Are you coming with me? Are there a lot of people you want to invite?" "No, just Ethan and Benjamin." "How are you?" "We're going to have a grown-up party." "What's that?" "Well, we'll drink, we'll dance, and we won't get kicked out of the dorm." "No, I made a deal. Commandant Kelly bought champagne and candy. She's only gonna close her eyes for one night. So, you know what you need me to do for you. Can you help me set the place up? I bought cigarettes and champagne, sausage, cheese, loaf. There's butter and sprats in the fridge. You do the boutiques well, and I'll buy juice. Deal? Let's go. We're late for our date." In the evening, the girls set the table. The appetizer was not simple, but Adriana tried to put it on plates so that the whole table was filled, and it seemed that everything was a lot. The guys arrived on time, took a box of chocolates and 4 bottles of champagne out of a bag. Kathy was handed a cosmetic kit of creams. "Wow, that's enough bottles for a whole wedding." Kathy was thrilled. "And the cosmetics are great. I've been wanting to get one of these for a long time, but was constantly out of money. We spent a long time choosing and consulting with the saleswoman. She recommended this set to take here in day and night cream, and for hands, and for feet, and around the eyes. In general, all you can take, and you will be a superstar." "Great." Kathy jumped up and poked the guys in turn on the cheek. "Let's get to the table. It's my birthday after all." Ethan opened the champagne silently and poured it into mugs. "I wanted to buy glasses, but they won't last long. I can't count how many of them have been used up." "Come on, it's fine from the mugs." Benjamin lifted the mug. "Happy birthday to you, Kathy. Be well and happy." Everyone raised their mugs and the check. The champagne hit Adriana on the nose, and she rarely drank it before. On New Year's Eve, she'd only had 1 sip and couldn't drink any more. It wouldn't go down. But today, surprisingly, she drank a whole mug. At once she felt cheerful and light. She wanted to sing, dance, and hug everyone. They poured everyone a second mug. Let me make a toast. Adriana stood up. Table, be ever so cheerful. You're like a sister to me. Adriana smiled at Kathy, walked over and hugged her. Thanks, Carlo. You're great too. The evening flew by quickly. The young people exchanged barbs and jokes. Kathy got up and turned on the tape recorder. A tune came on. It was a slow, very beautiful composition. Kathy walked over to Benjamin and pulled him to the center of the room. They embraced and began to dance. Kathy put her hands on Benjamin's shoulders and kissed him. He didn't pull away. So they danced and kissed. Ethan looked at Adriana. Let's go and dance. Do you mind? I don't mind. Come on. They joined the dancers. Ethan hugged Adriana tightly. She liked the music, liked Ethan, liked the evening itself. She rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, swaying to the beat of the music with him. She wished the evening would never end. But everything has its limits and its time limit. The music ended. Kathy dragged Benjamin out to the balcony to smoke. Ethan lowered himself onto the bed and placed Adriana on his lap. He put one arm around her waist and the other around her shoulders. He stared intently into her eyes. Suddenly, Ethan pulled her to him so that his face was in front of hers. Ethan touched his lips to hers, and the world around her suddenly disappeared. It was just him and her and their evening. Her clothes slid off her shoulders and hips. Adriana was burning in Ethan's arms, hugging and kissing him as if this was the last day of their lives, and they would part forever. The door to the room opened briefly and closed immediately. Kathy jumped to her fist and dragged Benjamin for another walk for a couple hours. Ethan and Adriana lay naked side by side on the narrow bed. The moon was shining brightly through the room's window. Adriana was happy. It wasn't exactly how she had envisioned this moment of her adult life, of course. But what had happened did not bring guilt, rather a sense of fulfillment. Ethan stood up and began to get dressed, dressing awkwardly in front of his friends. Oh, really? I'll be quick. Adriana really quickly got dressed, and the bed was shut. It was like nothing had ever happened here. Ethan poured himself and Adriana more champagne into a mug and raised his own. Here's to you, and to you, Adriana said. The door opened not much, then wider. Then Kathy's head appeared in the doorway. Are you all right? The newlyweds are fine. Are you coming in? Benjamin, come in. Kathy sat down at the table and opened the box of candy, took one, took a bite, and put it back in the box. Delicious candy. I should try them with champagne. Kathy, happy birthday. Benjamin raised his mug and looked around at the crowd. I wish you happiness. Finish technical school well and get a good job. Benjamin, let me live. Work can wait. Kathy grumbled unhappily. Wish me a woman's happiness. I wish you a woman's happiness. Now that's good. Let's have a drink. Then Kathy asked Ethan and Adriana to go for a walk. They got up and, holding hands, went outside. The night was quiet and without windy. The moon shone brightly, illuminating everything around them. And after technical school, where will you work? Adriana turned her head and admired Ethan's profile. Ethan was tall, blue-eyed, brunette, was trim and shoulder clean. He had rowed in high school and played on the soccer team in tech school. I don't know yet. I think the chip factory is hiring our graduates. I don't know either. I'll be thinking about getting a job next year. That's right. A lot of things can change. Don't be in a hurry. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. They walked slowly along the street. The bridge supports were fiddling ahead. Let's go and look at the river. We'll go at night. They came to the suspension footbridge, stopped near the fence, and looked into the distance. It was the longest footbridge, about 200 meters long, narrow, only 1.5 meters wide. Standing on it at night was a little creepy. It felt like flying into the water, but it was a vain fear. The construction of the bridge was strong and will stand for many years to come. On this bridge, it was customary for the lovers of the town to declare their love to each other. There was a moonlit path from the moon. The city seemed shrouded in mystery and mysticism, Adriana began to think that this man was her destiny. Naive. In the summer, all the students went home. Adriana and Kathy were no exception. Benjamin and Ethan also went to their parents' house. Before leaving, everyone exchanged phone numbers, promising to call. Adriana arrived at her father's house, and the usual routine began. She read books, went to the river to paint, collected berries and mushrooms in the forest, sewed outfits. Half-sister was already 13 years old, the teenage period. She dyed her hair green, wore one earring, and had a tattoo in the form of a cat on her shoulder. She was allowed everything, got away with everything. Adriana she treated with disdain. She took her room while she was studying, and Adriana had to live on a sofa in the kitchen. In mid-July, Adriana began to feel sick in the mornings. She lost her appetite and became dizzy. She put it all down to the greasy food her stepmother cooked. But the rest of the household was fine. She only became suspicious when her cycle didn't start on time. She waited another week. Nothing happened. Worry was building up. Adriana couldn't sit at home and rushed to the drugstore. She bought a test and tested it. The result was disappointing. Pregnant. The news was overwhelming and alarming. What to do? Adriana decided to call Ethan, dialed the number, and heard the dear voice. Hi. Hi. He's happy to hear from you. How are you doing? Not so good, to say the least. What's wrong? Ethan, I'm pregnant. Are you sure? It's a sure thing. What should I do? Ah, bad timing, of course. No abortion. You'll have the baby. What will I tell my father? Nothing. Don't tell him yet. I'll come and we'll decide everything. Ethan arrived on the weekend and asked for Adriana's hand in marriage. Dad didn't understand the reason for the rush. Kids, what's the rush? Let's have a proper wedding. Wait a couple or 3 months. We don't want a big wedding. We want a normal college wedding. We'll organize it ourselves. We just have to get everyone together. All right, do as you see fit. Thanks, Dad. Adriana hugged her father. She really missed his love. But her father was busy with her stepmother and her sister Sonia, and there was always something going on, and she needed constant attention and adoration. Her stepmother had no love for her, and her father simply, unconditionally loved Sonia. At the end of August, Ethan and Adriana got married. Those friends who were able to attend were invited to the wedding. On Adriana's side were her father and stepmother, and on Ethan's side were his parents and older brother. The wedding was played in a local dining room. There was plenty of room, and the food was good. Ethan earned money for the wedding by repairing audio equipment. His parents added a little. Adriana's father paid for the dresses and rings. Adriana's witness was Kathy. Lena was the witness. They stuck together as a couple. Adriana could choose any wedding dress she wanted for now. Her belly was not yet visible, so she chose fitted, with open shoulders and a wide bodice skirt, beautifully dwarfed by lace and pearlized beads of different sizes. Instead of a veil, Adriana chose a pull in the form of a silver tree branch with rhinestones. White shoes, she bought the most ordinary ones. When she tried on the whole outfit, she looked magically tender and very beautiful in the mirror. May this outfit bring me happiness. Adriana made a wish. Young people were making noise and joking near the registry office. The young people were worried. Finally, it was their turn to go to the reception hall. Adriana, Ethan, Kathy, and Benjamin walked in front. All the other guests a little further back. The registrar's speech was short. She wished the newlyweds love and fidelity to each other and suggested that they exchange rings. Ethan put a ring on Adriana's finger, and she put a ring on his finger in return. The registrar congratulated the young couple and at the end of the ceremony invited them to seal the bond of marriage with their first family kiss. They kissed. And once again, the world around them disappeared. Adriana's heart froze, and her sense of time disappeared. She dissolved in Ethan and in her feeling for him. They only woke up when the guests started making noise. Did you guys break all the records? We were going to order pizza here to make the most of the time. Kathy laughed. Can you kiss? Everybody laughed. We walked to the cafeteria. It was not far from the registry office. Parents were already standing in front of the entrance to the canteen. They sprinkled grain on the newlyweds and wished them happiness. The wedding was fun and not without adventures. A couple of young people managed to fight, so they had to get a first aid kit and treat wounds. Adriana threw her bouquet high up. The bouquet was caught not by Kathy, but by another classmate, Lisa. Kathy took offense. So I'm not getting married. Yes, you will, said Benjamin. Not all at once. Take your time. You're a comforting man, aren't you, Benjamin? Kathy took him by the arm and said, You will be the most beautiful bride. I promise you. Benjamin squeezed Kathy's hand. The wedding lasted only one day. The next day, the young people gathered in the dormitory. They brought snacks and champagne and had a party. Commandant Kelly came to the light. She was immediately poured champagne in a mug. Tip of the hat to you, yes, love. Kelly's toast was short. We'll give you a private room as a gift from the administration. She drank the drink in one gulp, took a piece of sausage from her plate, and went to her room. Thank you. Ethan and Adriana barely had time to shout after her. The party continued into the morning. They found a guitar somewhere, sang songs, danced. The guests scattered to their rooms. Only in the morning Ethan and Adriana did not even undress from fatigue. They just collapsed on the bed, hugging each other. In the morning, the whole dorm was looking for Brian. Everyone had a headache from too much champagne and wine the night before. Some were swallowing aspirin. Others were brewing coffee. Ethan got up and went to the kitchen. 15 minutes later, he returned, carrying flavored coffee in a cup. The cup was very beautiful. Adriana, my wife. Wake up. Coffee in bed. My God, I feel like an aristocrat. I want it every day. What's with the cup? Did the neighbors borrow it? It's beautiful. You're prettier than any cup. Oh yeah, sleep at night with makeup on. I look like I fell out of a tree. Baba Yaga is now prettier than me. Adriana tried to laugh, but faltered. My head hurts. I'll bring champagne now. Being aristocrats is like that in everything. Ethan left. Adriana quickly took off her wedding dress, put on her regular clothes, grabbed a towel, and headed for the shower. Washed off all her makeup, had a good wash, barely tidied up her hair, and went back to the room. Ethan had already brought champagne and 2 glasses, but where would the glasses come from? Luda gave them to me in our miserable dorm. She says there's only 2 left, so she's giving them to us. Oh, great. Here's our first family dinnerware. We won't have these dishes for a long time. Ethan smiled. Glass has a way of twisting. I've made sure more than once. These won't stay beautiful for long. I'll have to stop by Kelly's to thank her. We'll go in together. We should get the keys to our room. I can't even imagine. My own room, Adriana replied. They ate a breakfast of sandwiches they'd made from leftover sausage and sliced bread and went down to Kelly's. Here came the newlyweds. How's your health? Morning. Thank you, I'm fine. Kelly, thank you for the glasses. They're beautiful. We were wondering when we'd get our room keys. I'll give them to you right now. What's the holdup? It's just that we need to do some repairs, paint the ceilings and floors and wallpaper. I can give you the paint, but you can buy the wallpaper yourself. Thanks, Kelly. Ethan took the keys, and he and Adriana went up to the 3rd floor to see the room. The room was bright, but in a bit of a state of disrepair. The wallpaper was hanging in pieces, the ceiling was yellowish in color, and there was the smell of smoke. Adriana was a little upset, but then decided that things would be much better after the renovations. They would freshen everything up, and the smell would disappear. And it did. Ethan invited Benjamin over, and Kathy volunteered to help paint the floor. Within a month, they had the room looking decent. The superintendent came in to see how well they'd done. Oh, well done. Now that's the way she does things. We did what we wanted. I wish you happiness in your new place. Adriana was due to give birth in February. Until then, she had to pass the session and apply for a sabbatical. Ethan was often late in the evening and came home drunk. Adriana didn't pay attention at first. She thought, well, they celebrate the session with friends to eat. But when he began to come between sessions under the fly, and she began to slowly resent, why are you drunk every night? Well, once, twice, but you almost every day come drunk. I want a sober husband by my side. Adriana's being picky. It's just the guys invited me. It was hard to say no. You should try it for a change. Time passed under the winter clothes. I could hardly see my stomach, but it was getting harder and harder to walk. It was a snowy winter. Adriana could hardly move on the street. Her gait resembled a duck's. On February 23, she set the table to celebrate the men's holiday. Ethan arrived late. She was about to fall asleep. On these winter days in the evenings, she wanted to go to bed early. Oh, the field is set. Happy feast. Sit down. You've had dinner. There's a present for you on the table. Thank you. I'm fine. Ethan didn't even look at the present. It's delicious. Why don't you eat it yourself? I don't want to, said the young wife. I'm going to lie down now. Sit with me for a while. I just made an order a while ago. The customer arrived. He asked me to come early. I'll sit a little, but not for long. I can't sit for long. My stomach is tight. It seems to me that the baby is inside, with all its arms and legs, and it's always pushing my head, or my arm is sticking out. Wow, you're taking it all in. I'd probably be dead by now. Nature designed women to be able to handle pregnancy and motherhood with ease. Otherwise, mankind would have died out long ago. Adriana laughed. And men are a relic of the past. An atavism. Ethan grinned, took a drink and exhaled. Soon, all but a few will be extinct. They'll be left to reproduce. You say for reproduction. 2. Will the women be lining up to serve them? Adriana frowned, then smiled. I imagined the picture. Yes, that's exactly what would happen. A few individuals to breed. Women in line. Ethan smiled contentedly. That was a good one. Yeah, you put everything in the fridge. I'm gonna go lay down and lie down. I'll eat a little more, then I'll put it away, the boy replied. Ethan sat there pouring himself a drink and a snack. He was kind of gloomy. Adriana put it down to his fatigue. Sleep came quickly, and she fell into it like a pit. In the dream, she was walking along the bank of a river, and a boat was floating on the river. In the boat sat Ethan, smiling but not looking at her. She shouted and waved at him, but he paid no attention to her. The boat disappeared around a bend in the river. Adriana stopped and suddenly felt her feet sinking into the sand. It was the sands of the future, and she sank deeper and deeper until she was up to her neck. She screamed and called for help, but no one answered or came. Suddenly, a man in camouflage, a stranger to her, ran down the hill. He saw what was going on, quickly oriented himself, found some sticks, put them down, lay down himself, and crawled up to Adriana and started pulling her by the hand. Then other people began to descend the mountain. Suddenly, a whole crowd formed around Adriana. She was pulled out and laid down on the grass. She was lying completely without Selena. At this point, Adriana woke up. Ethan was sleeping soundly next to her. She got up and went to get a drink of water. Her stomach was pulling and very hard. The child did not push. When she went to the wash basin, she felt something running down her legs, and she could not stop it. It was her water breaking. Ethan, get up. The water's breaking. What about the water? What do we do? An ambulance. Yeah, we should call an ambulance. I've already packed my bags. I just need to get changed myself. Ethan got up quickly, dressed, washed his face, turned to Adriana. How much time do we have? They explained to me in the course at the maternity hospital that there's 12 o'clock after the departure. That's when I'll make myself a quick coffee and I'm ready. Take your time. You can have breakfast. And I won't have anything, just water. Ethan went to the kitchen, made coffee, brought it to the room, and started to eat breakfast. It was undesirable to drink coffee, but even its smell was unpleasant for her. Now, during her pregnancy, her love was cream. She could drink 2 glasses at a time and still wanted more. And she also craved sweets, but she only allowed herself marshmallows so she wouldn't gain too much weight. However, the extra 5 pounds were not growing. Adriana dressed one last time, looked over the things on top, put the exchange card in her purse, her passport, but she herself could not interfere with her stomach. Ethan finished his breakfast, began to dress. Then he walked over to Adriana, who was sitting down, and pulled on her low, soft suede boots without a lock. I helped her put on her down jacket, and she put on her hat. The cab was parked near the entrance. It had snowed all night, and there was a thin path leading away from the driveway. Ethan opened the car door, and Adriana struggled to get into the back seat. The driver had thoughtfully slid the front seat farther forward. They drove through the snowy city, and the snow continued to fall. The driver made sure to pull up to the front porch of the emergency room. Ethan got out and helped Adriana out. He took the bags from the driver and paid for them, holding Adriana under his arm. He opened the door and they went inside. There were already 3 couples sitting there. The woman had already changed into a robe and slippers. Adriana had taken off her coat. Ethan got the slippers and helped her take off her boots. She changed into her robe and was ready to be examined. The line moved fairly quickly. Soon, there was only 1 pair left in front of them. You'll take the coat and boots home. Let's put them in a bag. Here's a big one and a separate one for the boots. She took care of everything. Don't worry. Strangely enough, she was calm. The impending arrival of the baby didn't seem to bother her at all. But that was only outwardly. Inwardly, she was tense. Sanakova Adriana. The midwife called out to her. Adriana rose heavily and went into the office. There sat 2 medical workers, a midwife and a nurse. Adriana put the exchange card and passport on the table. They started filling out the documents. When all the data had been entered, the midwife invited her for an examination. During the examination, some more near-dense water came out. The midwife had been working in this maternity hospital since the day it opened, had delivered many babies, and now, based on her advanced age, she had been put on reception. "Mani, you will give birth today." Savaliva took her to the delivery room. The midwife helped Adriana down from the chair, signed the bags. The nurse wrote papers with her name on them and put them in the bags on top, then took them and led Adriana to the elevator. They went up to the 3rd floor where the delivery room was. "Lie down on the couch. They are coming to take a blood test." Adriana lay down. A woman in labor was lying on the next bunk and moaned softly. There was no one else. The doctors came in. A heartbeat machine was brought up. The baby was recorded. A young nurse with a suitcase came running, quickly pulled out a test tube and landscape, pricked her fingers, took blood for analysis. The anesthesiologist came in and said that due to the wrong position of the baby, it was decided to have an emergency cesarean section. He began to fill out a questionnaire, asked about reactions to medications, the presence of diabetes mellitus, then told me how the anesthesia procedure would take place. He said that the operating room would be ready in an hour. Adriana lay on the couch, her whole life flashing before her eyes. The upcoming surgery was frightening. She had previously read cesarean section, wrote that the stitch hurts, it is hard to walk. How will she take care of the baby? But she's not the only one who's having this surgery. I mean, how do moms do it? She'll do it. They brought a sheer cape and a hat. Adriana changed and lay down on the gurney. The nurses wheeled her into the OR. From above, the ceiling was being moved. She couldn't orient herself where they were taking her. There were turns and doors, then turns again. And then they were in the operating room. A huge lamp lit up and shone in her eyes. Curtains were placed in front of Adriana so she couldn't see the surgical process, and in the stadium took Adriana by the hand and sat her down, gave her a shot in the spine and injected medicine. Then put a pulse on her finger, Oksana a meter in a vein, put a catheter, and began to gradually inject the drug for us ultrasound from the fact that the fetus was pressing on the veins. Adriana was feeling dizzy. She really wanted the weight off of her. The drug started to take effect, and Adriana stopped feeling her lower body. "How are you feeling?" The anesthesiologist held her hand. "You say she won't fall asleep with me. I'm fine, but the baby's pushing and I'm dizzy. You'll feel better soon." Now they're making the incision, taking out the baby and this little girl. The doctors cut the umbilical cord and lifted the baby high so that Adriana could see her daughter. A feeling of joy, gratitude, and emotion awoke in her. "My daughter, now you will be treated and stitched up. After that, you will be taken to the intensive care unit where you will spend at least 6 o'clock for observation. You're going to be a little dizzy. That's normal when the anesthesia wears off. Ask the nurses for a blanket." The baby was brought in and put to the breast. Adriana felt tenderness for this little red lump of life. Then the baby was taken away to be examined. Adriana was taken to the intensive care unit. There were 4 other women in the room with her. All of them were also post-C-section. As the anesthesia began to wear off, Adriana felt very cold indeed. So much so that her teeth were chattering and she was shivering. "Nurse, I'm cold," shouted Adriana. The nurse came with a blanket and covered her thoroughly. "Your body may be itchy now. Do not scratch it under any circumstances. You'll be itchy later on. It's a side effect of the anesthesia." And indeed, when Adriana accidentally scratched her chin, her whole body immediately became itchy. She wanted to scratch everything with fierceness to take away the itch. But she what to eat. The force was held back. Her neighbors were experiencing the same thing and complaining. Adriana asked for the phone to inform Ethan, but he did not pick up. Then she wrote a message. She gave birth to a daughter. Weight so-and-so, height so-and-so. Everything went well. She got nothing in reply. Adriana was now unable to think about where Ethan was and what he was so busy doing that he couldn't answer. 6 o'clock passed, and the roommates began to be taken to their wards. They came for Adriana. Again, the ceiling floated overhead. Turns, doors, turns again. Rolled into the ward and put her next to the bed. "Let's carefully climb over and onto the bed," one of the orderlies commanded. First one leg, then the other. Adriana tried to do so, but a sharp pain pierced her stomach. Biting her lip, she courageously and patiently moved her body onto the bed. The pain seemed to spread throughout her body. Everything was hurting already, and Adriana groaned. Now the nurse would come in and inject herself with painkillers. "Be patient, sweetheart." The orderly squeezed the plums, looked at her. She would have been glad to be with Adriana longer, but there were many women in labor, and each one demanded attention. The father called. "Adriana, what about your daughter? How did you have a baby?" "Daddy, the girl's name is Betty." "Congratulations. What good news. How are you doing?" "Not too bad. I had an emergency C-section after the surgery because the baby wasn't laying right. There was no other way. My daughter is recovering. The hospital will do whatever they need to do. Take care of yourself." "You take care of yourself too, Daddy." Adriana tried to turn on her side, but the pain was getting in the way. After struggling and grabbing the side of the bed, she finally turned around. A nurse came in and administered a painkiller. It became a little easier, and Adriana fell asleep. When she woke up, she saw that there was a plate with a strange liquid on the nightstand, and on the next bed there was a neighbor who had been brought in while Adriana was asleep. "I'm Miranda," said the girl and fixed her long dark hair. "I'm Adriana. And who was born to you?" "A boy. I had a girl." "So you had an operation after me?" "Yes, you were wheeled out and I was wheeled in. My stomach hurts a lot." "And you?" "Oh, and the nurse told me that they're gonna be lifting us out in 12 o'clock. "Oh, only if it's a crane." Adriana laughed, but she didn't let the pain get the best of her. "We're definitely not going up without it." Miranda smiled. "I can't laugh. It hurts me too." "Is this your first child?" Yes, we wanted a girl, and it was a boy. But it's good too, and we were just waiting for a baby. I don't care who. That's great. I've already bought a crib, and the sides for it, and the stroller is already there. We'll go for a walk. We just picked it out. My husband has to buy and put it together. What's that on the nightstand? We're not supposed to eat after the anesthesia. I was told they'd bring a light meal. This must be it. She looks so appetizing to eat. Do you want some of this soup? No, I'm eating it. Will there be anything in my stomach? The nurse came in and said she had to get up. Adriana got up first. She walked a short distance from the bed and came back up. She wasn't dizzy and her stomach felt empty and light. Adriana thought sadly that there was no one else inside pushing and disturbing her day and night. Girls, in an hour we can go wash up. A cheerful red-haired nurse peeked into their room. Oh, great. I'm sick and tired of this construction, afraid to turn around to avoid hitting it. And indeed, another nurse came in and freed them from the marking tubes and invited Miranda into the shower room first. She waited for her to get a towel and underwear and went with her. There she explained how to do everything and stood by to help in case she suddenly felt sick. Then it was Adriana's turn, and she was happy to go swimming. She loved it, but for now there was only a hygienic shower. She bought a special long patch to keep the stitching for the suture from getting wet. Miranda, when do you think we will get the babies? I don't know. They said the next day. Just as she said that, the door swung open and the nurse drove off. Visa. One rolled up and to the other Adriana. In them lay two tightly rolled packages. Following the orderly came with, and the red-headed nurse invited Miranda to learn how to undress and dress the baby. Miranda took the baby in her arms and walked over to the personalized table. And you watch and learn. The nurse invited Adriana in. Miranda carefully unwrapped the baby. He was so tiny and fragile. With confident movements, the nurse showed the women how to hold the baby while diapering, how to put on and fasten the diaper. It all seemed simple to Adriana, but when it was her turn to crucify her daughter, she became terribly agitated. Her hands trembled as she took the defenseless body. She was afraid of hurting something. Having mastered her feelings, Adriana confidently took the girl, just as the nurse had said, and the soap sewed to pairs, put it on the table, then took out some pretty clothes from her bag and dressed the little girl. It was the turn of feeding. The nurse showed how to put to the breast. The women did what other women had done for centuries before them, feeding babies. It didn't go well the first time, or did they think so? The babies opened wide erotically and tried very hard to get milk. After an hour, both babies were taken away for procedures and told they would bring them back in the evening. Adriana was pleased with herself, but her stomach was very sore. The painkillers helped, but not for long. She tried to sleep. It succeeded with great difficulty. As soon as she fell asleep, the doctor came in for his rounds, touching her stomach to make sure that everything was going well after the birth. It was painful, but Adriana gritted her teeth and endured it in her own interest. Then there was lunch, for which we had to go to the canteen. The woman and the laughing woman walked slowly and strangely to the dining room, but they could sit at the table, unlike those who gave birth naturally, who could only stand in the dining room. The tables were for 4. There was a line of 15 people standing at the window, all with their own spoons and mugs. The hospital gave utensils to those who did not have any, but recommended to bring their own. Lunch was sparse but enough to eat and not be hungry. Adriana ate everything. Miranda didn't eat cottage cheese casserole, was put off her plate, and didn't like cabbage stew. But Adriana ate even that because it helped with her digestion. After quiet hour, they'd brought in the babies again. A red-haired nurse brought them in. Mommies, here are your babies. Now they'll stay with you until your discharge. Do you remember how to take care of them? Any questions? No. Adriana and Miranda answered and laughed together. It was both joyful and anxious that the babies were staying with them. Then I'm leaving. If you need anything, go to your post. Each moved you to your side and admired the sleeping baby. When asleep, they were so sweet and defenseless. Their eyes hadn't quite opened yet, and they didn't quite see the world around them. And so the days until discharge dragged on. Getting up, washing, dressing, feeding the baby. They took turns in the dining room and tried to eat quickly so that the other could go too. During all this time, Ethan sent only one letter of congratulations on the birth of his daughter. He never wrote again. Adriana had no time to wonder what was wrong with him or where he was, probably busy with work. So deep down she wanted to hope. In a day, Adriana and the baby were to be discharged. Before discharge, all women in labor had an ultrasound to make sure everything was okay. Adriana healed on time, with no complications. Adriana left the ultrasound room and dialed Ethan. He didn't pick up for a long time, and then she heard his forbidding voice. "Hello, hi. Is it me? Have you been drinking? I had a little last night. Why? Do I have the right? I'm being discharged tomorrow. I want you to meet me. You've packed the crib, and you haven't yet. I'll do it today. So please do it. Our daughter needs a place to sleep. What are we gonna name our daughter, Betty? I like that name. All right. Chuckles, I'll need you to go and register her. It'll be done by what time you get discharged. I'll take a cab. I'll call you after 2. There'll be time to come. I've got to get ready for work. I'll go to the supervisor's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow." Adriana put away all the unnecessary things. She looked at Miranda. She was holding her son in her arms and saying something softly to him. Adriana looked at her daughter. She was sleeping peacefully. She thought about what was ahead of her when she arrived home and had to take care of her daughter, the house, and her husband. She imagined sitting over the baby's bed at night and singing lullabies to her, Ethan smiling and taking the baby in his arms, rocking her if she cried, of them walking together with the stroller through the park. In her dreams, she was happy and peaceful. She has a family where she is loved and where she is loved. This was comforting to Adriana. Betty was eating well, sleeping well, and slowly gaining the weight she had initially lost after birth. She had quite opened her eyes by now and was looking around with wonder at everything for a little while awake and then falling asleep again. At night, as she slept in a jumpsuit that said "Love Mommy" and Daddy on it, Adriana felt a pinching feeling in her chest and cried. She cried, wiped away her tears, and cried again. Her heart sank with emotion. The daughter was so tiny and so defenseless. "I will protect you from everything, mine, sweet daughter." Adriana made her vows to her child, and the child heard nothing and slept soundly. The next day in the morning, she was told that she could go home in the afternoon. Adriana fed and changed her clothes in the meantime. My daughter started to get ready to go home at 12 o'clock. Ethan didn't call, but her father did. "Hello, daughter. How are you doing? How's the baby?" "Hey, Dad. She's fine. She's being discharged today. Ethan's supposed to be here, but he hasn't called yet. You call me if you need anything." Dad's voice sounded kind of weird. "It's gonna be okay. Dad, I'll be in touch. Bye, daughter. Bye, Daddy. Kiss Betty for me." "Okay." After talking to her father, Adriana felt uneasy. It was unclear what was causing this uneasiness, but it wasn't going away, it was only growing. Adriana looked at her daughter to see if she was okay and dialed Ethan. No one on the other end answered, and she dialed several times. It was no use. Time was running out. The papers had already arrived. It was time to get ready to go out. Adriana dialed her father's number. She was almost crying. "Daddy, can you take a cab and come and pick us up?" Ethan won't pick up the phone. "I can, daughter. I'm all alone now. I'll come. I'm already packed. Call me when you're on your way." I put Betty on and came down. "Take my coat and my black shoes in the closet, please. I don't have any clothes." Ethan took everything away when I went into labor, and a scarf or something. "Betty has a fur envelope. Good thing I brought it. Warm clothes, too. I'll take your blanket that's in the closet so Betty won't get cold." Okay, Daddy. Adriana ended the call and cried. Her husband came to pick her up. He decorated the car with balloons and was allowed at the gatehouse to drive right up to the exit. Miranda dressed the baby, dressed herself, shrunk. She became quite different from the Miranda she had seen on the first day. Miranda was a very beautiful young woman. She said goodbye to Adriana. But I wish you all the best, a speedy recovery, and many happy days. Here is my phone number. Miranda held out a piece of paper with Adriana's number written on it. Thank you, Miranda. Adriana hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. All the best to you and the baby too. Long and joyful days together. You recover quickly too. And take care of yourself. She also hugged and kissed Adriana and took the baby in her arms. Miranda's husband came into the room, a tall, thin guy. He had shoe covers on his feet. He took the bags and was the first to leave. I waved goodbye to God, Adriana said, and walked to the window. Miranda and her husband and child had not come down yet. They were nowhere to be seen. Adriana didn't know yet that on the way out they were writing everyone out. A photographer would catch them and offer to take a family photo. Here they were finally out of the driveway. Miranda's husband walked to the car, opened the trunk, and loaded all the stuff in there. He opened the back door in front of her and took the baby from her. Miranda got into the car and her husband placed the newborn in a special seat. Adriana waved from the window. Miranda waved back. The car slowly moved off and took Miranda to her new family life with the baby. The phone rang. It was Daddy. Daughter, I was on my way downstairs. Daddy, please come upstairs to me. There's a shoe shine machine up there. Put on your shoes and come up to my place. I have to get my bags. Why didn't I think of that? You old fool. I'm waiting for you. Adriana took one last look to see if she'd forgotten any belongings or documents. Everything was in order. She didn't feel like putting on makeup at all. She was upset that Ethan hadn't called and come to pick her up. Had he packed the crib? Would there be a place for Betty to sleep? And the bathtub. She'd asked him to buy one the night before she gave birth. I guess he forgot and didn't get it. How do you bathe a baby? That's how upset her father saw her. Here I am, like Betty, pretty, but let's go. The father took the bags and they went to the elevator. They went down. There he took Betty in his arms and showed Adriana the bag with her shoes and coat and scarf. Everything was lying on the bench. Adriana got around quickly. Her legs felt surprisingly good. Slipped into comfortable boots, coat, scarf, and she was ready. The steps are slippery. Let's walk carefully. You carry the baby and I'll carry the bag and walk in front of you. A photographer came up to them. Would you like to take a picture? When he saw Adriana's tearful eyes. No, we don't want one. Adriana and her father walked out of the entrance. The car was parked outside. They didn't have to walk far. February was snowy, but today it had melted a little, and there was ice in some places. Adriana stepped very carefully, very afraid of falling. The driver got out of the car, opened the trunk, and put their things in there. The chair was already installed in the cabin. Adriana did not yet know how to buckle up the little ones. The father volunteered to help. Come on, I'm buckled in. I've worked in cabs. I know how to do it. All right, you get in the car. Don't get cold. Drive us, please, very carefully without sudden braking in potholes, avoiding everything. Got it, Chief, Cabby responded. Can we go now? Half an hour later, they were already at the hostel. The room was locked. Adriana looked for the key she always carried with her. She opened the door and was horrified. There were empty beer bottles and chip and pizza wrappers on the floor. The crib was littered with clothes. Ethan lay on the bed and slept soundly. The room was unbreathable from the smell of booze. The father frowned unhappily. Daughter, let's go to our place. We'll get you a room. No, Dad. I can handle it. Just help me. What do you say? Dad set the bags down, opened the window. Adriana put Betty on the bed and began to disassemble the crib. Father found a bag and collected bottles and packages in it. Half an hour later, the room took on a lively appearance, and Ethan still hadn't woken up. "Daughter, what shall we do with him? I want to beat him up, the bastard. How could he get drunk on a day like this and not pick you up from the hospital? I'll never forgive him for that. Daddy, I'll take care of it. Thank you so much." Adriana hugged her father and kissed his prickly cheek. "Can you go? Let me go to the store and buy you some food." "Daughter, I'm not leaving you." "All right. Make sure you buy milk and bread and whatever you want. I'll be back soon. If he tries to hurt you, I'll be right there to put his brains in his place." Alki. Father left and Adriana went to make a nest for Betty. She took out of the closet bedding a blanket, quickly freed the crib from the military clothes on it, and shot the mattress. First put on Not My Lingering sheet, then put on the blanket on top of the usually under blanket. She used the bed instead of a personalized table, slowly untied the pink bow, unfolded the blanket. Next was to unbutton the jumpsuit and pull Betty out of it. Betty grudgingly said, "Daughter, are you home now?" With these words, Adriana put Betty in the crib. She started to shake her head in surprise as far as she could. Her arms and legs moved erratically. She couldn't seem to control them. "And it was you, Ethan, struggling to get out of bed. I'm sorry. I was celebrating the birth of my daughter and things got out of hand. But I promise it won't happen again. You don't have to. You were supposed to pick us up from the hospital, not Dad." Adriana was angry and hurt. "But I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It's my fault. I'll think about whether to forgive you or not. I am very angry with you, and there is no telling when I will be able to calm down. The idea of a soul award to raise the room is a good one." Ethan stood up, grabbed a towel, and staggered to the shower room. There was a knock on the door. His father came in and brought a whole bag of groceries: milk, bread, vegetable oil, potatoes, green apples, bananas, kefir, cooked chicken cutlets, tea, juice, cookies, and condensed milk. "I've heard that when you're breastfeeding you should drink lots of tea with condensed milk to get more milk in your breasts." "Okay, Daddy, you are the best," replied Adriana. "You're my daughter. How can I leave you?" Where did that father choose his words? He woke up, the bastard. I sent him to the shower, and he apologized. "Dad, I don't like the fact that he can't control himself." "I don't like it either." "Then you've got it all figured out on your own. If you don't need my help anymore, I'll go home and chew." "Daddy, your folks are waiting for you." "Yeah, the phone's been ringing off the hook. Where did I go?" "Thank you so much again." His father faced Ethan at the door, gave him a scornful look, and walked out without a word. Ethan picked up the brush and dustpan and began to sweep neatly. He got dressed and went out, took out the garbage. He walked for a long time and came back, carrying a bouquet of 9 dark pink roses. He theatrically got down on one knee and handed Adriana the bouquet. "Thank you for your daughter. And forgive me. Assholes, please. I'll think about it. Please don't take too long to think about it. I want peace in our family." That Betty cried. "It's time to feed my daughter. You go make something to eat." Daddy brought some cutlets to heat up and a bunch of potatoes. "I'm very hungry." And obeying, Ethan took the food and went to the kitchen. Then he came for a pot with a skillet. Adriana was feeding Betty, and there was something sacred, magical, mesmerizing about it. Ethan admired it. "Everything's ready. I'll set the table. I just can't have no alcohol. Have you chosen your ration yet? I've only had one drink. I'm not gonna do it again, honestly. We have to celebrate your arrival." Ethan set the table, brought a steaming pan of potatoes and cutlets from the kitchen, put them on a rack, took out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses from the cupboard, which the Commandant Kelly had given them for their wedding. Adriana had already put Betty to bed and sat down at the table, put potatoes on for herself and Ethan, cutlets each, poured juices for herself, a glass. Ethan opened the bottle and filled his glass. "I want to drink to you girls, to keep you happy and healthy." "Thank you," Adriana replied dryly. She drank the juice and began to eat greedily. "Did you buy a bathtub?" "No, but my neighbors promised to give me theirs. It's almost as good as new." "Yeah, only 2 kids have bathed in it. But I'll buy a new one." "Tomorrow you want to buy it today?" "Yeah, we're having our first bath. We'll invite Kelly. She's like a mom to us." "She sure is. But cheers." Ethan chugged a glass of wine and began to pour another. "Wait, you said you'd only have one. Can I have a couple more?" "I don't feel like having one. I have to meet you properly. You said you wouldn't have any more." "I gave my word, and I kept it. 2 drinks, that's all. But we'll see." They had dinner. Ethan had 3 glasses of wine, Adriana 3 glasses of juice. Ethan wasn't lying. He didn't pour any more, but saved it for tomorrow. Betty woke up from the window, and Adriana went over to the crib, rocked her, then took the baby in her arms, sat on the bed, and began to feed her. Ethan sat next to her and watched his wife and daughter. Betty ate and sang again. She was the perfect baby, at least for now. Ethan put his arm around Adriana's shoulders. "I'm sorry, okay? I've missed you guys so much. But it's only been a week." "Yeah, there's always late nights at work. My name is. As a young professional, I can't say no, or I won't be accepted." "Okay, at work, but at home." "Why drink at home?" Adriana asked. "But the neighbors came to celebrate the birth of their daughter." "Yes, of course. The neighbors came and got you drunk. So much so that you forgot that you had to pick up your wife and child from the hospital. But your father took you." "I knew he would, so I didn't worry. It's a big day for our family. And I wish it was you picking us up, not my dad. It turns out my dad cares more about us than you do." "Yeah, I get it, and I get it. I'm sorry if you can. It really upset me. I don't know when I'm gonna get over it." Adriana put the leftovers in the refrigerator and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. Ethan sat and watched his daughter sleep. Betty, especially, did not bother crying at night, ate well, and was gaining weight. She was a cheerful, curious girl. She was interested in everything. Adriana took the baby in her arms and walked around the room with her, naming things. Then they would go out into the corridor. Walking outside, Adriana also often took Betty out of the stroller and showed her the world. The girl would look at everything with curiosity. One day they came in from the street, and Adriana noticed that Betty was sluggish. He touched her and she was hot. The thermometer read 38.5. Adriana didn't know what to do. She called her father. "Daddy, Betty is sick. She's feverish. She's lethargic. She won't eat. What do we do?" "Calm down, daughter. You were sick a lot, too, weren't you?" "What did Mommy do?" "Mommy undressed you and wet toweled you." "Just warm water." "I'll do that." "Thanks, Daddy. Call me if you need anything. Tomorrow, call the doctor at home." "I will. Good night." Adriana undressed the baby, took a towel, looked in a basin of warm water, and began to rub her body. Betty did not resist, breathing heavily. Adriana measured her temperature again at 38. It had come down a little. There was no sleep in either eye. Ethan had not yet come home from work. Adriana made herself some local tea and sat beside the crib. She listened and was afraid to miss the warning signs of something bad. She had read a lot about childhood diseases, knew that there were very severe forms, and children sometimes died from them. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter dying. She cried. She cried for a long time. Ethan came into the room and was frightened what happened. Story was sick, high fever. I sat there and thought that there are diseases from which babies die, and I thought that my little girl would die. So I cried. Don't even think about it. It's just a virus. Your body's probably building up immunity. That's why you have the fever. I read about it without thinking, and I'm interested in the subject too. I was just reading an article at work today. I come home. Betty is sick. We're going to call the doctor tomorrow. We'll buy some medicine. What will she prescribe? It's nervous. I've been under a lot of stress lately. Calm down. I'm here for you, Ethan said. The next day, we called a pediatrician from the children's clinic. The doctor came, examined, and listened. Betty looked at her throat, told her to put her to the breast more often. If the temperature will be too high above 38, drink, use suppositories, and all antibiotics do not need. Don't do that, just watch for now. Here's my cell phone. If anything changes, cough, or rash, call me. Adriana liked the pediatrician. She was a middle-aged woman with neat hair and manicure, spoke briefly and clearly without a lot of unnecessary words, could calm panicked moms. Adriana spent the day with Betty in her arms. If the girl fell asleep, she napped, and she fed the baby on demand. By evening, the fever had gone down and then spiked again in the morning, but not as high. Adriana stayed close to the crib, drinking tea while sitting next to it. If she went to the kitchen or to the shower, she ran back. She was afraid something had happened, but nothing happened, and Adriana calmed down. At night, she slept soundly, opening her eyes at any rustle. In the morning, changing her daughter's clothes, Adriana noticed red spots on Betty's body. She immediately called the pediatrician, frightened. "Hi, this is Betty's mom. She has developed red spots on her body, and her temperature has dropped as low as 35. It's a birth virus. It's a common childhood illness. You don't need to put anything on the spots. They'll go away on their own. It's all right. Betty has done well. Come see me next week for an appointment. I'll need to have the girl measured and weighed. Thank you." I was scared out of my wits. Adriana and her daughter went to see the pediatrician once a month. The pediatrician examined the girl, measured her height and weight, and wrote it all down in her file. Soon it was time for colic. Baby Betty screamed incessantly. She took turns being carried by Adriana or Ethan. If he was home, Adriana ironed the quadruple towels with an iron and laid them on the baby's tummy. I bought special colic drops on the advice of my pediatrician, but nothing helped. Betty would go quiet and then start screaming like crazy. The whole dorm knew that Betty had colic. So Kelly came and brought fennel seeds, told Adriana to brew them and give them to the girl a little at a time. "And drink it yourself, it won't hurt." "Oh, thank you. My mom used to give me something like that too. And I forgot, use it already. I made them. I don't know what they're for." Then I remembered that my sister-in-law gave them to me when her granddaughter had colic. It helped. It should help Betty too. Adriana immediately went to brew the seeds, condemned them, poured them into a mug, and put them into a syringe without a needle so that it would be easier to give them to Betty. The girl, wrinkling her nose unhappily as the incomprehensible liquid was forced into her mouth, drank a couple sips and began to sip the rest. Adriana sat all wet, drank the rest of the potion, and started to change her clothes. She changed herself and changed her clothes. "Betty, here, my daughter, you and I are dressed in clean clothes, and the colic will run away from us. They'll go away." Adriana really wanted to believe that. Maybe it was the potion, or maybe it was past their time. But the colic was gone. But the teeth were starting to come in. For Adriana, another marathon began. Betty cried and scrubbed, putting her fists in her mouth and drooling. Adriana bought a special ring for the little girl to chew on honestly. Betty began to scratch with pleasure at the new toy. However, not only the ring was used, but everything that little hands could grab and pull into the mouth. Mommy's finger, for example. For the first time in a week, Adriana could relax for a while. The goiter came out pretty quickly. Betty looked very funny with one tooth. Adriana took a picture of her and sent the picture to her father. He responded by taking a picture of Adriana's baby picture in a scrapbook where she was a replica of Betty with one tooth sticking out of her mouth too. "Dad, I don't remember that." "How can you remember that? You were just a baby, always chewing on my finger with your songs. We used to give you a crust of bread to make it easier. Do you remember details like that?" Yes, my daughter. It was an interesting time in your life. Now you're an adult with children of your own. I feel like an old man. Like an old man. Daddy, you're the youngest daddy in the world. Thank you, daughter. I wish Mom could have seen Betty. She would have been so happy. Yeah, Adriana's sad. I wish Mommy could hold her granddaughter in her arms. Betty grew by leaps and bounds. Adriana took care of her with Ethan and the house. Ethan would occasionally come home drunk from work, but he swore and swore it was the last time. Adriana put up with it for the sake of the baby, who reached for her daddy's arms, rode happily on his neck, squealed with delight when Ethan tossed her up. Adriana was afraid he would drop her one day. He almost did, but Ethan picked the little girl up just in time. After that, Adriana forbade him from tossing Betty up. Betty grew up, and it was time for Adriana to go back to work. She applied to various organizations, called the Classifieds, went to the labor exchange. She found a job as an accountant at a manufacturing firm. Their accountant was going on maternity leave, and Adriana went temporarily in her place. But there was no choice. She had no work experience at all. She graduated from the technical school thanks to the fact that she was appreciated by her teachers. They turned a blind eye to some mistakes on exams and credits, and Adriana finished the technical school well. Betty had to be taken to a daycare center before she went to work so that she would adapt faster. On the first day, Adriana brought the girl for a couple hours. On the second day, Betty stayed until lunchtime, and so it went to a full day. Betty walked without much resistance. The educators said that she sleeps well in the afternoon. She eats almost everything too. It was safe for Adriana to go to work. She made up her mind and got a haircut. Not a bright manicure, bought new leather shoes and a skirt. Monday morning, the alarm clock rang. For Adriana, a new phase of life was beginning. Life went on as usual. Adriana worked, took Betty to daycare. Ethan disappeared at work and still drank in the evenings, though he swore every time that he would quit. Adriana silently tolerated everything, both her husband's absence at the right moments and his wild lifestyle. Until one day there was an incident that put an end to Adriana's family life. It was an ordinary weekday. Adriana took Betty to the daycare center, waved goodbye through the window, went to the bus stop, habitually got on the bus, and came to work. The working day passed a little nervously. They were preparing reports for statistics. I had to stay for half an hour. Adriana finished the last report. She put all the documents in a folder and took them to the chief accountant. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was the kindergarten teacher. "Hello," Betty fell and broke her lip. "There's a lot of blood. It's probably going to have to be stitched up." Adriana grabbed her jacket and ran out of the office. On the way, shouted that she was going to the hospital with the baby. Called a cab, and in 20 minutes was already at the daycare center. All the kids had already left. Betty was sitting on a bench and sobbed often. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Adriana ran up to her daughter and squatted down in front of her. "Daughter, does it hurt a lot?" Betty could only moo. Adriana transferred her daughter and hailed a cab. She told the driver to take her to the emergency room of the trauma ward. When they got there were a lot of people sitting there. Betty quietly sobbed and called for tears. She had no more strength. Finally, they were invited in by two young doctors in green suits and caps. They examined the wound. A young nurse prepared all the instruments. Adriana held her daughter's hands. When the baby was injected with anesthetic, she began to scream and burst out. Adriana used her last strength to calm her daughter, but it did not help much. Another nurse came to the rescue. While the stitches were in place, Adriana managed to mentally die several times. Betty's eyes swelled with tears. Suddenly, one of the doctors pulled a small doll with big eyes out of his pocket. Betty became silent and stared at it intently. The doctor put the dolly in Betty's palm and said, "You did good. The operation was very difficult. You were screaming, but you made it through. And that's why this doll goes to you." "Thank you, doctor." Adriana didn't know how to thank him. She only now felt dead tired and wanted to sleep. Please take care of yourself. They walked out of the hospital building. They had to walk down a long alley to the road. They walked slowly and in silence. Betty was silently looking at the dolly. What did the doctor give her? She had already thought of a name for her, Zoya. So they reached the bus stop where Adriana hailed a cab. They sat in the back seat and charged each other. That's how they drove to the hostel. When they entered the room, they saw Ethan and two other men at the table. They were drinking and snacking on whatever they found in the fridge. Adriana burst into tears, and the new ones are eating out of here fast. You can't see the baby with the stitches. She's in pain and needs to rest. And you're here drinking vodka and smoking. Ethan, how could you even think of such a thing? You promised me you wouldn't drink anymore. I can't wear this anymore, she cried. Ethan stood up and swung a punch at Adriana. She swayed but did not fall. In response, Adriana lunged at him and started hitting his face, his shoulders, everything she could reach. A beastly rage awoke in her. Betty in the corner screamed, "Mommy, don't, Daddy, don't." The men, seeing what was wrong, stood up, grabbed Ethan, and sat her down. Adriana quickly put on her jacket, dressed Betty, grabbed her bag, and they ran out of the room. Already downstairs, Adriana stopped. Where to go at night? Commandant Kelly was on the spot. She looked out the door and was horrified. Adriana, Betty, what's the matter with you? Come in here at once. Oh, Kelly. Ethan led the men into our room. They were drinking, smoking. When I started to object, he hit me. Can you believe it? That bastard. That's one word for it. And he's a child abuser. He's completely brain dead. Where are you going to go? I don't know. I'll call my dad, but we're not welcome there, and there's no room. But they'll let us in for a while, until I find a place to live. I'm not letting you go to your father right now. You're not thinking of dragging a child out in the middle of the night. What happened to her lip? Yes, it did. We went to get stitches. Oh my God, my sweet girl. Kelly took Betty in her arms, put her on her lap, held her close and stroked her head and shoulders. What is Kelly doing to me? I don't know yet, but I can tell you this. If a man raises his hand on you once, he'll raise it a second time and a third, until he kills you. How many times have I seen that happen? Run away from him, girl. And run where? You can stay here for now. I've got plenty of room. I don't come here often. I've got another room. I'll put my papers there. Can you go get my stuff when he goes to work? I got a 12 o'clock. I've got towels, and I've got my green, and I've got my absorbent cotton, and I've got a stitch. Thank you, Kelly. You're so good. You're like my mom. I feel like a daughter to you too, don't I? My baby died when she was 2 from the effects of meningitis. Ever since then, I always look at girls her age as my daughter and see her in them. I'm sorry. When did you get over it? I worked nonstop, changed everyone, never took a day off until they forcibly kicked me out. Was it hard? Very hard. I cried into my pillow at night, mourning my little girl. God never gave me any more children. You're all like my babies. Kelly walked over to Adriana, hugged and kissed her cheek, stroked Betty's head, and went to her den. Here is the key, closes the whole thing. It's warm in here, and you mustn't be disturbed by anyone. I am usually found in the little den. Good night. Good night. The commandant went out with the magazine and the files. Adriana undressed Betty and put her on the bed. She sat down on the chair next to her, thought, undressed, and lay down. Sleep came quickly. This time she dreamed that she was riding on a high-speed train and the fields and towns rushed by. They were traveling together with Betty in a compartment where there was no one but them. The conductor brought 2 glasses of tea in metal cups, put them on the table next to each other, put 2 lumps of sugar and 2 teaspoons. The tea had lemon in it. Adriana took 2 tickets from the table and saw that they were going far away to the big city. Betty pushed Adriana in her sleep with her foot and she woke up. The dream did not continue. In the morning, Adriana called the head accountant and explained the situation. She gave her permission to take the day at her own expense because Adriana was the fastest to turn in the reports. Ethan should have gone to work by now. The woman looked at her sleeping daughter, went out and closed the door. She went up to her room and carefully opened the door with her key. Ethan was not in the room. Adriana quickly gathered all of her belongings, Betty, her own, carried into the room. The commandant then went upstairs once more and picked up the dishes. The room was a mess, bottles and cigarette butts lying around. There was encore in. Adriana opened the window and started to air it out. Then, remembering that she hadn't picked up her papers, she took out her marriage certificate and birth certificate. Betty put everything in a folder. Family life was over. After a little thought, Adriana took a piece of paper, sat down at her desk, and wrote Ethan a goodbye note notifying him that she could no longer live with him and that she was filing for divorce. Wrote that he could see him whenever he wanted, but only when he was sober himself. Folded the sheet and left it on the table. On her side of the house, Adriana was doing chores. Molly had to be fed. Betty was due to arrive soon. Michael came home glum. Adriana got worried. Is something wrong? Your face is gone. You look pale. I don't feel well. Let's rest up. You'll eat. I made you a nice dinner. I don't feel like eating. My stomach hurts a lot. Yesterday it hurt, and I noticed blood yesterday. I don't like it. Go see a doctor, please. I'll go to the doctor's office tomorrow. Whatever they say, I'll go there for sure. Betty arrived. She set down her bag, hugged Adriana, said hello to Michael, and went into the house where Molly immediately ran up to her. Betty started a game of hide and seek with her. Molly loved to hide, but she was always easy to find because there was always something sticking out. Betty would immediately become blind and could never find the girl. Molly would laugh and yell, "Here I am," and ran out of hiding. Betty, Molly, go get your supper already, girls. Adriana put food on a plate for the girls and sat down next to them and drank currant leaf tea. She liked their flavor very much. Mommy, I passed my exams. Good, you're my clever daughter. I never doubted you. You did well in school, and I didn't have to sit in class with you. You've been so focused and serious since you were a kid. All that's left is a diploma, and that's it. I'll finish this technical school. What are you planning to do next? I don't know yet. If I can't get in this year, I'll go to work, of course. You'll get in. You're smart. I'm smart too. Molly held her head up proudly. Of course you are. When Adriana and Molly came into the room, Michael was already asleep. Adriana lay quietly beside him and thought how much she loved him. She had never trusted anyone since Ethan, and it was a miracle that Michael had been able to melt her heart. With these thoughts, Adriana fell asleep. She had a dream in which she and Michael were walking through the meadow. Michael was holding her hand. They came to the bank of the river and looked at the other side. There were boats standing there. The bank was high and precipitous. Suddenly, the ground under Michael began to move, and he collapsed down. Adriana ran along the shore and tried to get down and help him, but it was in vain. The current there was swift and the river was deep. Michael was swept away, and she never saw him again. In horror, Adriana jumped up. Michael was here beside her, so near and dear. Adriana calmed down, lay down, and did not dream again until the morning. In the morning, Michael went to the clinic. He was given a list of examinations and tests that he had to undergo. He had time to take a general blood test, biochemistry, and do an electrocardiogram. All the week, Michael went to the offices and underwent the examination. He was frightened by the changes in his body. The doctor's verdict was disappointing. Colon cancer with metastasis to the lymph nodes. Michael didn't know how to tell Adriana. She was expecting their child, their son. He really wanted to hold his son in his arms, to go fishing with him, but apparently he wouldn't have to. The doctor said that with timely treatment, there's a 65–90% chance of survival, so he would try everything to be cured. Adriana was getting ready to pick up Molly at daycare. Michael walked into the house and silently made his way to the room. Adriana came out and went to get her daughter. Michael opened the oncologist's report one more time. Yes, that's what it was. Cancer. The prognosis was disappointing. It was devastating. Is this really it? He's still so young. Michael hoped the chemotherapy would help. Next week, he was to go to the oncology center. He'd be treated there. They would try to treat the tumor this way. Adriana and Molly came home from daycare. They met Betty outside and went into the house together. The mother-in-law was outside and gave them a look. Michael made dinner and set the table. My girls came to wash their hands at the table. I don't invite twice. In a flash, we all went to the bathroom to wash our hands. Molly was lax with Betty. Adriana was nudging them towards the table. Everyone was seated. Michael looked at everyone carefully, wanting to memorize their features. He couldn't believe that he didn't have much time left to live. Michael, you've been acting strange lately. What did the doctors say? Adriana, it's serious. It's bad. I have cancer. They're gonna have to do an MRI in stage 2 or 3 to confirm the diagnosis. And I've already been scheduled for chemotherapy. Michael Adriana didn't know what to say or how to find the words. The ground was once again falling away from under her feet. Could it still be okay? There are treatments, aren't there? They didn't tell me anything. I'm going to the oncology center for treatment in a week. Then they'll do an MRI, and then they'll decide my fate. Jesus, where did this thing come from? You were fine. Yeah, I had a stomachache once in a while, but who doesn't? What can I do for you right now? Adriana's heart was breaking in pain. Only she had built a happy family life, as a terrible disease takes away her beloved husband. Girls, let's not be sad. We're all around each other now, and I love you all, and we love you. Molly and Betty looked at him. We're going to get through this. I believe that too. Otherwise, what kind of head of household would I be? I will definitely wait until my son is born and rock his cradle. Of course, honey, of course. Adriana could hardly hold back her tears. A week later, Michael packed his things and went to the hospital. He told her not to visit him until he called her. Adriana was very upset, but decided to be strong and focused, no matter what. Michael and the kids need her. She would not give up. Every day they had long conversations with Michael. Sometimes he would say he was in for treatments and ask her not to call them for a few hours because he was nauseous. Adriana had broken through to visit him several times, but he wouldn't allow it. He didn't want his wife to see him weak. He really wanted to beat the disease and do everything to do so. The course of chemotherapy had already lasted a month. After it, Michael had a magnetic resonance imaging study. He was found to have metastases in the bladder, prostate gland, and lymph nodes. Doctors suggested surgery. Adriana lost weight, became like a shadow. She moved mechanically, did her job, took care of the children. But her thoughts were with Michael. He gave her permission to come, and she rushed to him. On leaving work, Michael looked exhausted. All his hair had fallen out. He was often nauseous, although all the necessary medications were prescribed. A catheter was secured in one arm. The tubing from it guided the IVs. Adriana took Michael's other arm in her hand, was sluggish and lifeless. There wasn't much left of the old Michael, only his eyes. Adriana loved looking into his eyes and seeing her reflection in them. She sat in silence and prayed fervently. The doctor came in and asked Adriana to leave the room. They are about to perform procedures. I will write to you when I can write. Michael's voice sounded quiet. Goodbye, sweetheart. Adriana tried to walk calmly out the door, but as soon as she got out, she cried. She tried to hold back, but she was not succeeding well. She got dressed and went outside, let her feelings come out and screamed. The tension was too high. There were trees all around, rare people passing in the distance. Everything went on as it was. People were born and died. There was nothing new. The moon looked at her indifferently from the sky. and I won't give it to you. Old woman with a scythe. Adriana stopped suddenly. Her tears had dried. She was overwhelmed with determination. She quickly walked towards the road, and there caught a cab. Already in the cab, she started reading articles about this type of cancer. The more she read, the more her hope for Michael's recovery melted away. She arrived home already broken and with a heavy heart. Michael was not released from the hospital, and the doctors continued to prepare him for surgery. The surgery was a success. The rehabilitation process was already underway. Michael was beginning to feel better. Adriana asked everyone she knew to pray for Michael. She herself went to church and put candles in the candles. She didn't know how else she could help him. Her mother-in-law would come and take Molly to her house. She got old and stopped. She was worried about her son too. She didn't say anything to her daughter-in-law. She came silently and left silently. Molly did not like to go to her grandmother, but the latter lured her with new toys and books. The girl was afraid to offend her grandmother and played at her place for a while. Then she said she wanted to go to her mom. The mother-in-law would take Molly by the hand and lead her to her sister-in-law. Betty supported her mother as best she could. She stayed with Molly. When Adriana went to the hospital, she cleaned the house, did the dishes, went grocery shopping. She tried not to cross paths with her mother-in-law, and when she met her mother-in-law on the street, she politely said hello and went on without stopping. My mother-in-law never stopped, only grumbled and followed. Tied around my son's neck, bloodied his leg. It was December and he seemed to be on the mend. The doctors continued chemotherapy. Adriana traveled to see him every day like she was going to work. At work she was released unconditionally because she was a good worker. She did things well and on time. If necessary, she could substitute for the accountants in any area. That day she was making out the results of the inventory when the phone call from the city number sounded. Adriana, this is the doctor on duty at the 2nd ward of the cancer center. I'd like to inform you that your husband Michael passed away at 2:20 p.m. I'm so sorry for your loss. You can come and get a death certificate. Yes, I will. Adriana answered mechanically, like a robot. She sank down on a chair from around the corner. From all sides, female employees came to her to comfort her. One employee was told by the chief accountant to escort Adriana to the hospital and asked the driver to take her. Adriana, I ordered that now you girls will get material aid from the cash register. Only write a statement later. Such grief, girl. Thank you. Adriana sat with puffy eyes and could not believe what was happening. Then everything was like a fog. Hospital, certificate, registry office, receiving burial allowance. Ritual agencies agreed that the funeral would be the next day at 14 o'clock. A farewell to the body in the memorial hall was opened from 12 to 2. Adriana walked into the house, tired and hungry. Betty poured her some hot soup. Molly put her arms around her neck. Adriana had no energy for anything. Her stomach was pulling. She lay down on the bed and immediately fell into a deep sleep. Her mother-in-law did not leave her side of the house to visit them. The next day, Adriana came out of the house pale and without a shadow of blush on her face. On her head she tied a black lace scarf. She took a cab to the memorial hall, entered and saw her beloved lying in the coffin. He was so pale and so calm. Adriana walked over and put her hand on his, and her hand was ice cold. You are far away from me now, and you won't be tortured anymore. Adriana's eyes were dry, all her tears. She had cried the day before, her stomach pulling hard. From the pain, Adriana couldn't stand for long and sat down on the bench next to her. Michael was approached by friends and relatives. Her mother-in-law wailed near the coffin, how the blood of her saint lived. Adriana listened to it all aloofly. When it was time to go to the cemetery, she sat quietly on the bench near the coffin and remained silent the whole way. When the hearse stopped, Adriana got out and saw the open hole of the grave and the cross beside it. The movers carried the casket out and placed it on a special stand for those who didn't have time to say goodbye. She kissed Michael on the forehead and stepped back. The coffin was lowered into the grave, her happy family life being lowered into the grave along with it. Adriana suddenly felt sick. Something hot was pouring down her legs. She went into labor and screamed. Her mother-in-law suddenly woke up, looked at Adriana with hatred, and shouted that you and your children should not be in my house. Find another place to live tomorrow. Adriana had already called an ambulance. It took her to the maternity hospital where she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. He was so much like Michael. In the future, the fate of Adriana and her children turned out well. She moved away from her mother-in-law to a small town where the authorities gave her rented accommodation. Adriana took up her favorite hobby of candle making and created her own brand Warmth of Your Soul. Orders came in from all over the world. There was plenty of money to go around. Her daughters and son lived with her. But before that, the situation was quite dramatic. Adriana had returned from the maternity hospital to her half of the house with her young son and wanted nothing more than quiet and warmth. Betty helped her get home and prepared everything to welcome the new family member. Adriana and the late Michael wanted to name their son William. That is how she registered the boy. Dimitri. Betty babysat William, and Adriana went to process the birth certificate. It was extremely lonely and difficult for Adriana. Even though there were 3 children at home, everything in her chest ached with grief and a sense of loss, as if a part of her had been taken away. Looking at little William, she saw Michael. She remembered how he dreamed of taking his son in his arms and spent hours sobbing into her pillow, sitting at night by her little son's crib. Her mother-in-law came to her room in the morning, tried to talk to her about something, but Adriana politely escorted her away, saying, "William, it's time to eat," and so on. Adriana needed time to recover from the labor and recover a little. She didn't have the strength to fight with her mother-in-law, to defend herself against her attacks. She missed her husband so much, she wanted to hide behind him, to be snowy and weak. But the mother-in-law was not going to stop. This time she came into Adriana's room and demanded that she put candles in front of the portrait and around the room so that Michael's soul could stay with us. Why so many candles? 1 is enough. So you want the memory of my dead son. Just because I don't put candles all over the house doesn't mean I don't love or remember Michael. And then there's the leftover smell of candles. Little William was starting to have a bad cough. The baby was turning red and choking. The mother-in-law wouldn't stop. "I guess you're eating the wrong things, trying the wrong things. Seeing that the baby has a cough at all. Have you started it?" How many times Adriana tried to oppose her and explain the cause of the cough, to ask her to remove the candles. But all the requests had no effect on her mother-in-law. She did not consider Adriana as a full member of the family. One morning, while Adriana was on her way to a doctor's appointment, the mother-in-law lit many candles in Adriana's room and left. Little William was lying in the crib. He began to cough and gasp violently. At that time, the flame of one candle spread to the curtains, and they caught fire. Where did they go? The acrid smoke spread through the room. Good thing Betty was home in the kitchen at the time, making dinner. She rushed her half Adriana and jumped into the room, quickly grabbed the baby out of the crib and ran out. Neighbors ran up and quickly doused the resulting fire. When Adriana returned home, she was greeted by a cold, damp, smoke-ravaged room and a gasping William. She cleaned the room, ventilated it, removed all the candles and smoke-missing bedspreads. Strictly forbade her mother-in-law to light any candles in front of William. You can only burn them in your room. It's not good for William to inhale their smoke. He may die from his father's wreaths. You don't love my son, and William has nothing to do with it, the woman replied. However, it was necessary to call an ambulance to the child, injected with antihistamines, because the nasopharynx began to swell. William soon fell asleep. This is how the confrontation between the mother-in-law and Adriana lasted. The father-in-law did not interfere, preferring to keep neutral. But then Michael's brother intervened. It turns out that he has nowhere to live. and he and his family soon planned to move here on Adriana's half. He and Michael did not have time to register the building, and it turned out that Adriana was on the street. William was already 6 months old. It was summer outside. Adriana packed all the things she planned to take with her, ordered a truck, and the whole family drove to a small town to Adriana's sister's house. The woman agreed to shelter the family until Adriana found a place to live. The woman went to the local administration and explained the situation, saying that she had been kicked out of her home with her children. The local head promised her rented accommodation, and in the future she would be able to put her children in a kindergarten. A month later, the housing was provided. Adriana and her sister went to see the apartment. It was quite tolerable. Just wallpaper, paint the windows, and the three of them could move in with her sister and her husband. They quickly made a small repair, and now it was time to take things apart in the new place. There were 3 small rooms in the apartment. The girls were in one, Adriana was in one with William in another, and the third was like a living room. The furniture, of course, was not enough, but it did not embarrass them. Gradually, the neighbors began to give their still good furniture. So Adriana and her children got a closet and a kitchen table. Stools and beds had to be bought in installments. Life was getting better. Betty became quite grown up and independent. She was already working and bringing home a paycheck. Adriana would take a little for groceries and leave the rest to Betty. One day, Betty introduced Adriana to her fiancé, Sam. They planned to get married in the fall, when the work on the cottage, which was Sam's father's, was finished. He was a widower, lived at the cottage in the summer, and traveled from there to work. The apartment was left to the young. Adriana met Jack when they came to matchmaking. It was easy for her to communicate with him. There were many common topics of conversation and shared interests. Soon his father proposed to Adriana.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Give a pedigree cat in good hands. Age 9 years Angora, accustomed to the litter box, sterilized, eats dry food premium. Call. Monica shuddered, so struck by the photo of a white cat, which looked from the phone screen with the eyes of her favorite. The cat Pushak, with whom the girl was inseparable since childhood, had recently died, and the cat in the picture was incredibly similar to him. The girl read the ad again, then looked at the image of the cat, thought, and dialed the number. Hello, hello. I'm calling about your cat. I'd love to see her. You see, she looks just like my dead cat. You'd think my Pusk had been cloned. Hello, and you can come visit us anytime. The woman on the other end had a nice, low voice. I think you'll like my Marquise. She's very smart. Monica noticed that the woman seemed sad or tired. It turned out to be a short drive, just halfway to Monica's work. They agreed on a time to meet. Monica didn't want to put the matter off and drove to the specified address right after work the very next day. A strange excitement swept over her, as if meeting someone else's cat was something special and decisive. When she found the right entrance, she stood for a minute, took a deep breath, and resolutely went inside. There was a tiny rug by the door of the right apartment. It was clean. She pressed the bell. A very thin woman of small stature opened the door. Good evening. It's me, Monica. Remember from the ad? Yes, of course. Come in, please. Inviting the guest in, the woman walked forward. Monica noted that her gait was not stiff, as a completely exhausted person, through the darkish corridor, went into the room. In a small apartment of the old type, there was hospital sterility and emptiness. No furniture, no appliances, no clothes hung on the chairs or scattered, no personal knickknacks or those not too necessary things which give the dwelling coziness. Even the curtains on the windows looked poor and temporary, of some cheap and frivolous matter. The house would not have been habitable if the lady in the white kerchief had not seated herself opposite Monica on a small sofa, making an inviting gesture. Monica looked at her, not without embarrassment. She looked haggard, her bloodless face like an icon. "Make yourselves comfortable," the woman said in the meantime. "Aye, Ashley, and here is our Marquise." She led with her hand, but Monica, at the entrance already, saw this incredible picture. The large white cat was sitting on the only chair by the couch where the hostess and Monica sat. She looked like a majestic statue. The emptiness around it especially enhanced the impression. The cat stared at the girl, studying her at first, and then shifted her gaze to the woman in the headscarf, as if demanding an explanation from her. Monica, too, was scrutinizing Marquise. "Hello, Marquise," she said quietly. "You are very beautiful." Tears came to her eyes, and the girl was silent. Ashley nodded understandingly. Pulling herself together, Monica turned to her. "Are you leaving, or?" "If." She smiled sadly. "I guess you could call it that." She paused for a moment. It was obvious that the explanation was not easy for her. "I love her very much, but—" Ashley slowly pulled the kerchief off her head, revealing a perfectly smooth skull. Oncology, the last course of chemotherapy, was a waste. "There's no point in surgery. I've got 6 months to live." Monica, stunned into silence. That's why her voice was so impassive, her face so pale. That's what the scarf was hiding. "What can I say? You know, I've gotten used to the idea." Ashley went on. "It's true that one gets used to everything. At first the news is like a lightning strike, and then you have to get on with your life. You can't go to the coffin alive." She grinned bitterly. The two women, from the first words, felt sympathy for each other and continued to talk about some unimportant things, trifles. Strangers, it would seem, had nothing in common, but two lonely people needed warm companionship, and the Marquesa, meanwhile, jumped down from her chair and approached them, rubbed herself against Ashley's legs, then raised her face to Monica's and meowed. "You two are going to be friends." Ashley predicted and smiled. "But you know, Monica, it's complicated. I think you'll understand. I have a scheduled hospitalization coming up, and I'd like to keep Marquise with me for 2 weeks. Would that be okay? And you'll come over after work. You'll get used to each other." "Of course I don't mind. Let her stay, of course." Monica said goodbye warmly and left to visit her new acquaintance and her cat during the agreed time. She was anxious, but at the same time somehow lighter after this meeting. This evening filled her with memories. With all her heart, she sympathized with Ashley. She involuntarily compared her own fate with another's and thought of loneliness. The girl realized that attachment to the animal is not a whim of a sick person. Her cat Pushok, who had literally grown up with her, became quite infirm in his old age. Coming in the evening from the realtor's office, where she worked as a lawyer on the registration of transactions, Monica, with sadness gazed into his sad eyes, watched the almost human, clumsy movements of his paws, which so wanted to call Gowdy. Even Pushka's meow began to resemble a senile rattling voice, and no vitamins could help him. The veterinarian, to whom Monica took the pet in despair, only sighed sympathetically and suggested, "Well, my dear, your cat is still long-lived. I am not God, and give him a second life cannot, but to ease his suffering can be." He glanced at Monica, whose eyes came to involuntary tears. "It'll be easier for you, too. 1 injection and the patient will go into a soft, eternal sleep. Believe me, it's the best thing we can do for him." Monica refused, went home with Fluffy. The two of them stoically endured the difficult months, without words understanding each other. The cat lay without strength, did not want to eat, only his gaze was understanding or forgiving. The girl cried, turning away. She was sure that Fluff would feel her despair if she showed him her tears. And one evening, when the mistress returned home, she found her furry companion had already calmed down for good, as if he had tried to ease his mistress's suffering. Monica spared no effort or time to take the pet's body, which had lost its soft pliability, to a distant abandoned dacha to bury it near her favorite lilac bushes, where once upon a time they had spent many happy hours together as a family. She was left all alone. The girl was returning from the half-destroyed fence of the old dacha, limping a little and talking to herself. Well, now there is no one to talk to, we have to do something. We have to live somehow. Who's a cat and who's a best friend? It's not my fault that I'm alone. I have to live. So talking to herself, she reached the entrance where the train stopped, under the clatter of wheels and conversations, looked out the dirty window and decided to take the cat. In the province, a lonely person is immediately visible. Neighbors know almost everything about him, everyone in sight. The fate of a loner in a big city is unenviable, especially if the character of the person is peculiar. Monica was a kind and intelligent girl, but childhood trauma left her a slight, almost imperceptible limp on one leg, and this complex she has not been able to cope with. In her distant youth as a romantic young lady, she had the misfortune to fall in love with a kid from the neighbor's yard, Jack. Black-haired and swarthy, he resembled a gypsy. He had incredible charm. Nowadays they'd call it charisma. He was a gambler and a desperate soccer player. A couple of yard games were still going on, and Monica could watch the boys, pretending she was interested in the game and not in any of the players. Girlfriends and little kids were squealing and yelling. Monica was in this crowd of fans too, and caught every move Jack made. His swarthy body soared in a run, the boy's supple torso aroused admiration. Jack was always surrounded by a crowd of younger kids. It was their idol. Without knowing Jack's character or habits, Monica fell in love simply with his appearance, so lively, full of vitality, boyish face with dark eyebrows, was thin and spiritualized in moments of play or lively conversation. Monica wanted to look at him and simply admire him. She stood at the window overlooking Jack's driveway for long periods of time, trying to track his exit and jump out, as if she were going to the neighborhood department store for groceries, just as Jack approached her house. Apparently, she was getting in the kids' way too often. At 13, girls don't have a sense of proportion, so what can you do? "Hey, you limp," he called out to her one day. "What's your name?" Monica felt as if she had been doused with ice water the moment when the boy she adored noticed her. But how? All he noticed was her limp. She then immediately ran home and did not even cry, only stopped looking in Jack's direction. After that, the girl ran through the yard as soon as possible. If there was a soccer game. More Monica never once allowed herself to think about men. Complexes received in adolescence often remain in a person for life. At her parents, the girl was a late child, and they looked at her as a child, not really delving into her mental space. Her childhood crush and remained unnoticed by anyone, and brought up on books, Monica closed herself in a cozy corridor of music, novels, household chores near her mother. "Daughter, don't you want to go to the movies?" her mother Margaret asked her. "The girls at the box office told me that a new movie is on, and people are pouring in." Being aware of the news from her young colleagues, the old lady began to worry that her daughter was always alone. She felt somewhat guilty for the incident when Monica had fallen off her bike and injured her leg. Although Margaret and her husband had then done everything possible for their daughter, the mother's heart ached. Of course, the blame for the aftermath fell entirely on the doctors, who, after surgery and treatment, sent them home, saying it would all go away with time. Elaborate. See, sun and good nutrition will help. Elderly spouses took their daughter to the sea, as they lived frugally and could splurge for the sake of her health, and nutrition was out of the question. All the best, Monica. In general, Monica was the one unique flower in the family garden. Margaret herself got married quite late. The daughter who had been stuck in girls was persuaded by her parents to marry their good, modest accountant, who had taken care of her sick mother until the age of 40 and remained single. The new family took shape. The spouses were completely satisfied with each other. The birth of a daughter was a happiness unexpected and almost unreal. That's why Monica was unconditionally adored by her father. Well, Margaret even allowed herself to dream of grandchildren. Having successfully graduated from the law faculty of the local university, Monica began to work, changed several places. She took root, oddly enough, in a noisy and crowded real estate company, helping employees and clients in drafting documents and guiding them through the authorities. The screaming girls, the young boys who ran through the office, were comrades at work, but nothing more. Monica was like from the last century, big gray eyes, dark wavy hair, and a tall, slender figure. But the main thing, of course, was in her smooth movements and manner of holding herself as if she had just stepped out of a picture of the life of counts and countesses. So her cold restraint kept her from getting too close. She was always on a first-name basis with people. At arm's length, the life of the family flowed peacefully and softly. Parents very quickly after each other went into the next world. Very modest, inconspicuous people who bore their duties all their lives as they should, and when they grew old, they passed away one by one, as if they were bound together. So Monica stayed with Pushka and lived quietly, not suffering from the absence of relatives and friends. After all, there was a kind friend who had given her his warmth and affection since her early childhood. Now she had a new relationship ahead of her. Monica stopped by Ashley's house a day or two later. "Hello, Ashley. It's Monica. Can I come by again tonight?" She called before she left her office. She was always happy to see a new acquaintance, treating her to tea from her meager supply. Monica, seeing the embarrassment of her new friend, brought her a little something so as not to embarrass her. She was an excellent worker and earned quite well for her position. Deals were made a lot, despite the crises and cataclysms that abounded in the last 10 years, and a good lawyer, both clients and realtors appreciated. But each time the guest became convinced that Ashley ate like a bird, and most often she had no appetite at all. The only food she accepted with joy was food for her favorite cat. Here Monica did not skimp on the most, what is to say, premium. Oh, perfect timing. Just sprinkling the last of it on her. Ashley's eyes lit up at the sight of the bag for Marquise. The woman looked away immediately, embarrassed by her poverty and not admitting it. Marquise will have to get used to me. Maybe she'll realize that I'm not unhealthy and accept food from me. Monica explained her in, smiling at Ashley. She didn't want to embarrass the sick one. "And where did you get such a gorgeous cat?" she asked. Ashley smiled weakly. It was obvious that the memory pleased her. "Oh, that's a very interesting story," she said. Funny and sad at the same time. Then she was silent, reconstructing the details of that long-ago day. There was always music in our house. My parents were different. Sometimes they had fun, and sometimes my mother liked to cry, even cry, finding some far-fetched reasons. Mom had no reason to cry, I assure you, Monica. Papa idolized her, but Mama, She was a real Carmen, hot and passionate and terribly, terribly jealous. My parents loved going to the theater and were regulars at Philharmonic concerts. And Dad once had the misfortune to praise one of our local singers. She sang the lead parts, had a beautiful voice. Her name was Lauren. Mama, of course, did not fail to show her temper. She made a scandal. Well, only at home, my sister Clara and I laughed. But Daddy wasn't laughing. So Mom asserted herself, you see. It may have looked silly from the outside, but Mommy knew what she was doing. Our intelligent, soft Daddy was also asserting his own importance. How could he? Such a beautiful wife, jealous of him, and to whom, prima opera stage, it means that he is worth it. It means that he is a real man. My God, how touching they were in their funny quarrels. And how did they make up afterwards? Dad would bring a huge bouquet, Mom would play the perfect hostess, which she never was, and cook exclusively to Dad's order. Ashley's bloodless face lit up as she told the story, became alive. It felt as if she had forgotten herself and distracted herself from her painful condition. Memories of loved ones gave her strength, but it was difficult to breathe. The woman took breaks to take a break from the emotional narrative. And then Mom went quite far in her marital zeal, wanting to prove that she was ready for everything for the sake of Dad, suddenly offered to go to the singer and present her with a bouquet. Dad was confused, but could not contradict Mom. It's great for the family and the kids. Daddy's never, ever been inferior to anyone. In work, in friendship, and in his love for Mom, he was faithful, acted only according to his beliefs and principles. And here they are, Mom, with an important look, Dad with a gorgeous bouquet, go after the play and the restroom actress, and there is no one, not a single admirer at the door. Not one, not even the most pathetic bouquet under the door. The actress, in whose honor just exploded with applause hall, sat in a corner alone, holding a cute little white kitty in her lap, and wiped her tears. It turned out that the other day Lauren leaves to her husband in Israel, planned her benefit, but the wife of the chief director, talentless and envious, did not want Lauren to receive a farewell ovation. She secretly warned the entire staff of the theater, who bribed, who simply frightened of dismissal, and the servants simply put the intended prima, bouquets and baskets in the backyard. Not only that, schemer, hoping, after the departure of Lauren to get her role, intrigues to achieve the cancellation of the benefit. The actress, having told about this completely alien to her people, burst into tears on the shoulder of our mother. Lauren, my God, how is she? How are you? You are a golden voice, my dear. Mommy hugged Lauren and sobbed with her. Daddy did not know how to calm this couple drowning in tears, but called someone from the closet and asked to bring champagne from the cupboard. When the parents returned home at midnight, having dropped off Mom's best friend, the singer Lauren, there was a little white cat in Mom's arms. Lauren left her living mascot to her new soulful friend. That's how we got Marquise. Mommy, with her inherent passion, was eager to fight, and this time was supported by both Daddy and us. She arranged a grandiose scandal in the theater, disgraced the mean wife of the chief for the whole city, but it was too late. Lauren left without revenge. And we're so fond of the cat. See how she's turned out. It's like a Marquise. Now she reminds us of 3 good people, Lauren, who also recently passed away, and my parents. That's why I love and cherish her so much. Ashley was tired. You could see it in her heaving chest and intermittent breathing, but her eyes were bright and her lips were smiling. It was the first time Monica had seen her so lively, almost cheerful, and she was glad of it. I can't give her the care I used to give her. Ashley repented. You see, Monica, there's nothing left. While I still had strength, I sold everything I had. I want to leave behind a vacant apartment so I don't have to go to the trouble of selling it. You have to face the truth. You're a very strong person, Ashley, said Monica, lowering her eyes. Very decent. That's the whole story of our family, said Ashley. The family was gone, and the story was over. Her pale lips even slightly parted into a semblance of a smile. And my life will soon be over. I'd like to end it in some beautiful way, but I can't think of anything, and I don't have the strength, let alone the means. Eric wanted to leave William money. He was worried that the apartment had become so empty, but my boy, he's a good boy, he didn't take it. He's too honest, he's a spineless man, like everyone in our family, but I'm glad that at least my apartment will be left to my nephew. He'll sell it anyway. Expand the housing in his town, I guess. It's the least I can do to thank him. Pure soul, how does he take care of me? He's been the only one who's kept me going these last few years. Isn't he going to move in with you? Monica asked. He is still working after graduation, and to live with a sick aunt is not the greatest happiness. I'm even glad he won't have time to do it. The things and the apartment are not the main thing, but I was so afraid for Marquesa. I love her more than anything in the world. This cat is the only thing dear to me. Marquise has been with me through the whole illness. Can you imagine? She calmed me down, lay down next to me on the sore spot, and after chemo, when I literally turned inside out, guarded me near the bathroom door. She calmed down only when I crawled out of there exhausted and got to bed, and from the hospital waiting for me. Now I will be calm for my beauty. You will not hurt her. The cat looked attentively at the two women and calmly lay in its usual place, as if it fully understood their conversation and sympathized with them. It smelled cozy and warm. Monica began to approach the cat more and more often, who was already allowing herself to be stroked by the stranger. When people have little time to socialize and all the deadlines are shortened, they bond much faster than in normal life. Ashley was in a hurry. She wanted to talk to Monica, to tell her about her own. The young girl proved to be a soulful and attentive listener. Gradually, she came to know Ashley's story in full. Young Ashley came to this city to study. She lived with her older sister and brother-in-law, who were already well settled here, working and raising a cute little son. Ashley adored her nephew's baby, and he reciprocated, but no matter what they said, it was shameful to sit on each other's heads in the small apartment of young married couples with a small child. 6 months later, Ashley moved into a student dormitory. Why are you leaving? Her sister Clara, as thin and white as Ashley, was indignant. I'm home. Soup is hot any time, study. There's your balcony, please. Brian, you tell her. She addressed her equally young, curly-haired husband. He was fully immersed in his favorite job, not much at home, of course. A teacher at a technical high school, this is not even a school teacher. He was required to immerse himself in 2 areas at once, the education of children and the organization of scientific work and practice with them. Brian came tired and did not really get into the household chores, but the recovery of the body needed, and he conscientiously, admittedly, would be happy to visit his favorite wife in the marital bed more often. And secretly he was looking forward to his sister-in-law's move, too, for she was young. Stay, Ashley. The young husband pulled, but not too convincingly. I did, and I didn't regret it at all. If you haven't lived in a college town, you're not a student. The girl from the province had an easy disposition, was successful in her studies, but most of all, she was attracted by the tourism section, where there were many strong and as cheerful as herself, guys and girls, especially the guys. One of them caught her eye. Tall, a head taller than Ashley herself, a powerful blonde. Eric seemed an odd name, but it didn't fit the stately fellow, with big hands, obviously familiar with a shovel, a paddle, or even a hunting rifle. And how is he, in general, studying normally? Ashley quietly asked his classmates, like everyone else. They answered her. He's a good student, of course, because of his diligence and effort, but sometimes he'll come up with an idea. Last week, he suggested replacing one tricky thing and the apparatus the most simple. And it worked like a charm. Can you imagine? Even our professor wondered how he didn't think of it himself. And indeed, Eric gave a suggestion that I wanted to try and practice. Technical university, but even here such bright heads are not often found, and in the Students' Trial Design Bureau, the backbone of the same thorough, thoughtful guys was gathered. No one was surprised when later they stayed together and set up the production of running household appliances. During camping trips, Eric often found himself next to Ashley, or maybe it was she who inadvertently fell into his arms. He's so big and handsome, seemed strong and dependable. In fact, he was. No, that's not how you fasten it. He stopped the newcomer and went to fix a peg under the tent. Have you ever tried it like this? He took a knife from his buddy and showed him how to split, with small shavings, the saved dry wood in order to quickly light a fire. And when, with one sharp movement, he set Ashley's dislocated leg on the mountain path, he became a god to her. She lay awake all night, grateful, remembering the warmth of his hands on her ankle and imagining his wavy hair in front of her. Her leg ached, but the curls of it, she could still make out. It must be true what they say about the rescued becoming special to the one who rescued him. And so it was with Ashley. He was now noticing her everywhere. "Hey, squirrel!" he shouted to her from afar. "It's a tough route today. Bandage your leg, you hear?" "Well, squirrel? Is it an axe porridge today?" He teased her when it was her turn to cook. So gradually, unnoticed, he got closer and closer. She mollycoddled and did not believe the happiness, but did not show it. By the end of the trip, the comrades, who noticed their not quite usual affection for each other, began to shout to both of them. Hey, squirrels! It was exactly affection, because they walked together, as tied to each other, and two bright heads always flashed near each other. When will you call me to the wedding? The sacramental question was finally asked to them at the end of the hike. What wedding? Ashley blushed. We will call you there when you get together. Order a cafe and we will call you there. Eric joked. There was no wedding. What kind of wedding for students? But they registered the marriage, drank champagne, sang to the guitar, had fun. Soon Eric graduated from the institute, and a year later Ashley defended herself. They got their diplomas, rented a place, and started the same modest, as in student life, joint life. Instead of couples at the institute, they worked in their cooperative, as it was then called a private enterprise, no matter how big or small. Eric turned out to be not such a strong technical genius as it seemed in his student years, but he gained such good friends, got to know such guys who could do incredible things in a couple of days. His decency and responsibility impressed almost everyone who knew him. And when he started his own business, many of the old guard were willing to cooperate. It was their time, precisely the moment when the country began to destroy industrial production. The adventurism of youth, the idea that united friends, the fervor and ardor, not wasted strength, moved them. How brave are young people who do not assume failures and failures. This ignorance allows them to act without regard to authority. Listen, old man, we're in the middle of something. You better run up. No one can solve it but you understand. It's a matter of honor old man, and the old man drove, walked, called back, although Eric promised him nothing, did not lure him with anything. He was just a man of business and talents, flocked to this very business like butterflies to the light. Everyone wanted to do something real to sweat, to give their best, to be interesting. So that steam would come out of their ears, and then a sigh of relief would come out of their chests. That's it. We found it. We did it. Eric? Ashley told him. What did you do to lure the professor? After all, he is a talent. He will win the Nobel Prize if he gathers his inventions in a pile and shows them, and you keep him in a smoky booth where there is nothing to breathe, not to think about. My little squirrel, you don't know anything about sausage trimmings. Eric hummed, grabbing his little wife by the shoulders and putting her in front of him. He didn't come to the office. He came to us, understand. Well, you do what you want, but people shouldn't work in these conditions. Ashley spoke. Let's calculate how much we need for new windows, furniture, again to renew. The computers are state-of-the-art, but they're on shabby, almost dumpy desks. Come on, I'll order it tomorrow, sign here. Eric, scratching his thick hair, sighed and signed, sometimes with a groan. What a dump, Ashley, for God's sake. They're college desks. Your brother-in-law wrote them off. At least don't say that to him. My sister's husband had been headmaster of a vocational college for many years, and he'd helped his brother-in-law with the written and scribbled desks. How could one resist the charm of kinship? The two families lived amicably, meeting on holidays at the dinner table, but not so long ago Clara and Brian moved to a neighboring town where their son studied at the institute. Ashley, though she was not an accountant by specialty, from the first days was engaged in the payroll of employees and other small matters to which Eric could not reach his hands. A woman's eyes saw the world differently, and sometimes her wife could see things and poke Eric in the nose, in his short-sightedness, that he marveled. Really, Ashley? I wouldn't have realized. Years went by, then flew, and they were the same loving squirrels, head to head, solving life's questions. On vacation, the spouses in the old memory went on hikes, mastering the most different, the most difficult routes. Once they had to interrupt the trip at the most unexpected moment. The son-in-law had a heart attack. He died overnight. Nephew was only in his first year. No comrades, no life experience. Sister in a new city has not had time to recognize anyone. In addition, in a terrible grief, confused. The funeral arrangements fell on Eric's shoulders. Ashley comforted her sister as best she could. Do you want us to move you back? While you live with us, we'll find a more comfortable apartment. You'll get a job. At least with Eric, there's always a part-time job in the office. You won't be lost, Clara. I can't go back there. Don't you understand? I was in tears, Clara. Every time I see you, my heart bleeds for the good life we had. Why did you think of moving? He could have worked in his college, but no, he had to go to production. These plans, this nervousness, and Clara was crying and wailing again, unable to talk about anything else. Eric went home. Things were busy. Ashley stayed behind to help and support her sister, at least for the first time. She was well aware that Brian had no chance of survival. That was what the doctors had explained after the autopsy. It was such a case that a heart defect does not manifest itself in any way during a person's life, and it is impossible to be saved from its manifestation without knowing about it beforehand. However, Clara did not want to hear this. She fixated on unbelievable options to save her husband and blamed herself. Ashley, almost all the worries of her sister, took on herself, and the wake for 9 days held, as Clara remained indifferent. What's all this for? Clara said. Would it bring Brian back? And she started crying again. It was impossible to sort out the dead man's personal belongings in front of her. Either she might just become hysterical. Ashley and William tried to get through this burdensome business as quickly as possible when she went to the cemetery. She went to Brian's grave every day and came back in tears. Neither son nor sister could resist. How can you keep a person from loving someone, even if it's a dead person? No matter how much I try to help, but to survive the death of a loved one, each must himself. Ashley had a job waiting for her, and Eric could use the support and care of his wife. But here? Clara should come out of her depression in time, and the absence of her sister will only be good for her. Otherwise, she will continue to live in her fragile shell of grief, unconcerned, disconnected from business, and worrying about her student son. If William didn't break through that wall between mother and everyday life, no one else would. That's what Ashley assumed. It was with a heavy heart that she left her two close, but now lonely people. Long conversations and shared affairs with her nephew had brought them even closer together, and now Ashley called daily not only to her sister, but also to William. "Oh, Aunt Ashley," William lamented. "I don't recognize Mama. She's turning into an old woman. Now she's started going to church. Can you imagine? She prays, she crosses herself, she even smells like a stranger, something heavy. I don't know what to do." They say daughters often repeat their mother's fate. Ashley's sister Clara certainly did. Her husband's death threw her into such a depression that the woman began to melt before her eyes. The son didn't know how to make his mother enjoy life, move. Mother became lethargic, uninitiative. Everything fell out of her hands. A constant gloomy mood and powerlessness possessed her. Weeks and months dragged on. At first, Clara hardly went to work. It distracted and supported her a little, but one day she simply did not get up in the morning. The doctor called by the exhausted son gave a referral for tests, but in the morning the mother lay listless and did not want to get up. William called his aunt and son-in-law. Immediately the relatives arrived and were amazed at how much she had given up. She was almost an old woman with a faded look, dressed in anything. She spent most of her time in silence, sitting somewhere and looking at herself. The shocked couple decided that they would come every weekend, wasting their energy and money on a short trip. As soon as the work week was over, Ashley and Eric would drive to Clara's house, dragging her out to a restaurant, to the countryside. Her sister even began to smile when she remembered the childhood pranks or words of little William. But no matter what her loved ones did for her, Clara returned to her apathetic state again and again. Soon things got even worse. She started to fall down on the spot. "Son, I can't see anything." With horror she said to William, when he returned from classes and hurriedly prepared lunch, "Would you at least read me what they say in the newspapers?" But immediately she forgot herself and sat aloof, dangling in thoughts unknown to the boy. In the meantime her son was trying, growing older and stronger, calling Ashley, and in an almost enthusiastic voice saying, "Aunt Ashley, I got a part-time job at a restaurant as a waiter. Sometimes I get tips. I'd like to continue. Thanks to Uncle Eric for his help, of course, but I like it. It's more fun, and I'm not the only one here. There are more of us." William's voice sounded cheerful, and he didn't want to object. Let the boy grow up, the couple decided. The money Eric sent them was enough, of course, but William was a man. He dreamed of independence. As it turned out, he was early to rejoice. Soon the part-time job had to be forgotten. His mother's health required his constant attention. It was clear that it was not depression. Soon he was admitted to the hospital, a terrible thing was revealed. They found a tumor in the brain, which was pressing on the optic nerves. The disease progressed so quickly that there was no point in surgery. Within 2 months, Clara was literally burnt out. It was quite unclear whether because of this disease she fell into depression or because of the worries after the death of her husband, so quickly developed a tumor. William was left without a father and mother, and graduation was necessary. "William," Eric said to him, "you study quietly. Don't think about bad things. You can't get your parents back. You have to live, and you have to live successfully and happy." Ashley added, "Yes, happily." Eric confirmed seriously, "Don't worry about money. We will also send you the necessary amount. When you finish your studies, welcome to our company, but in the meantime, for all weekends and vacations, we are waiting for you to come to us." And again traveling sad troubles, again sorting out the things of the closest person, memorial tables and candles. Ashley, this has not been easy. Even more painful for William. Her favorite boy, so kind, so tenacious, so diligent, was without a family. "William, it's normal, when children bury their parents. It's when parents have to lose their children. That's terrible. So take it for what it's worth." "Well, some people have to do it sooner. Some people have to do it later." She kissed him on the top of his head, leaning his blonde head against hers, and tried not to cry. If only he had a girlfriend, it would be less depressing to leave him. But no. He gave himself all to taking care of his mother. He had no time to start a relationship. "Yes, I understand. Aunt Ashley, I'm fine." William reassured her and hid his eyes too. Now they understood a lot about their mother and sister's behavior, but there was nothing they could do. Ashley tried to give her nephew the warmth he received from his mother. As much as it was a pity for the nephew, the couple had to go to their place. They could not live for the young man. In the evenings they could not talk about anything but Clara's death. Could it have been a fatal mistake? Ashley wondered aloud. Maybe Clara should have gone back. At least here we are, the people and the town already settled. "Ashley, death will take its toll." Eric said sadly, "You know that very well. It will wait until you fall asleep. It will deceive, but it will steal the one who must die on this day at this hour. Explain it however you want." Yes, Ashley understood. She thought again of her mom, who couldn't get over her husband's death. Her parents were not a quiet, friendly couple. Their relationship was reminiscent of Italian movies. Her jealous mother was always suspicious of her father, calling him back at work if he was late. The father would be patient and silent for a long time, then explode, and the girls, Clara and Ashley, would cover their ears. Then the parents, as if nothing had happened, would dress up and leave for the theater, for a visit or a banquet. They would quickly pack up and leave for the South, entrusting their daughters with an independent existence. The girls laughed at their parents' eccentricities because they knew how they adored each other. The first words when Daddy came home from work were, "Where's Mom? Is she home?" Mother, taking off her shoes in the hallway, already asked, "Where's Daddy? Is he home yet?" And when the father fell under the car, a drunken slob, the mother barely lived without him for a year, then quietly died in her sleep, not giving trouble to her daughters. It seems that with the death of her husband, she completely lost the source of life. She did not raise her voice, did not show any passion, and was a flat, boring aunt, and not even retired yet. If Clara had not had Ashley and Ashley had not had Clara, it is hard to imagine how they would have borne the loss of their parents. Sisterly affection is stronger than the closest friendship, for the sisters have known each other all their lives, since before the youngest was born. And now in the second place after her husband, For Ashley was a nephew William. Ashley herself, God, did not give the child. In their youth, the couple did not suffer about it at all. They had enough of each other's society. They were never bored. So many interesting things around, so many topics for conversation and discussion. The most interesting thing is that they were together or near each other day and night, but Ashley never had a desire to get away from her husband, what is called in long married ladies, to take a break from him. Apparently Eric felt the same way. "Aren't you bored with me?" Ashley asked him. "You've got smart men in your office, and I'm just so-so here." "So you have such smart men in your office?" Eric laughed. "And I'm not much of a man either." He came up to her, ruffled her blonde hair, and said, "Squirrel, it's good that you are a squirrel, isn't it? How much paint do other wives spend to cover their gray hair? We save money, and the main thing is that it's forever. Where are we gonna spend the savings? The wife would pick up on it. Come on, William, why don't we buy something fancy? Let the girls hang all over him." "Let them." Eric waved his hand. "Remember, I had sneakers and fancy jeans. If it wasn't for those clothes, you wouldn't have hung on me for anything." And they continued to tease each other and fool around as if it hadn't been so many years since that romantic time of their crush. Life is just as beautiful despite the time. Sunshine, green trees, mountains, if you drive a bit in the right direction. When Ashley decided to take her women's health seriously and try her luck at childbearing, it turned out that it was too late for her to worry about it. Perhaps some hereditary reason played a role, or maybe the distant hikes gave such a result that children are no longer obtained. Whatever. Eric waved his hand when she told him about the unsuccessful visit to the doctor. Not everyone has to be a parent, and not everyone can. We have William after all. Lukaville maybe just wanted to appease his wife so she wouldn't have an inferiority complex. Ashley will recall this moment many times later. But how do you know how the husband really felt? And what good would it do? You can't get back what you've lost. They are vivacious, full of youthful vigor, have already visited so many countries, it is now easier to travel comfortably and still hike as they did 15 years ago. This summer, William is away on an internship. Why don't we seize the moment? Eric suggested to his wife, "Where have we been?" "Let's go mountain hiking." "Look at the route." "Oh, that's a whole new direction." "This is my dream." Ashley was happy, light, slim as a girl. She was good-looking and still young in appearance. Her health had never failed her up to this point, but this summer's trek was not going to be easy for Ashley. Already on the train, she felt short of breath. As she stepped onto the platform, her heart clenched. "You look pale." Eric was worried. "Woman's Day." "It's not like that, is it? It's just stuffy." Ashley hastened to refute his suspicions. "It will pass in the air, and what air there is here." And she put her face into the fresh breeze. The climb up the mountain again brought her breathing difficulties, and she felt dizzy and dizzy. She seemed to have walked only a little, but she was already exhausted and sat down right on the path on a large boulder. "All right, let's go down," Eric said sharply. He helped his wife to get up and dragged her down. The descent took a long time, and the couple stopped from time to time so that Ashley could rest. She was put to bed at the bottom, but her strength was too slow to recover. The injections given by the paramedic on duty did not help. Ashley and Eric were driven to the nearest hospital by random hitchhikers in a large Jeep. Other vehicles would hardly have been able to make the journey, or rather, off-road. Eric spent the night in a chair in the hospital hallway. In the morning, he could barely wait for the doctor to examine his wife. Alas, The doctor's hands folded. Your wife has something more serious than fatigue or malaise by the looks of it. I suppose a CT scan is necessary, and we don't even have a decent X-ray machine. The elderly doctor sighed and thought for a moment. You know what? We'll keep her here for now, help her body to gather strength, and you contact a serious medical institution. Then you'll know exactly where you're going, and your wife will be able to travel more easily. For now, I would recommend that she rest. A frustrated Eric shook the doctor's hand and went to call his family. They had almost no family left, so they had to look for friends who could help. Calling all the reserves and resources, Eric drove his wife to the Central Center, put her in a good clinic. Friends helped. Neurospecialists suspected the same thing. By all symptoms, it was him cancer. Death, which sneaks up and gnaws into the body stealthily, sneakily. After the necessary time for the examination, Ashley returned home. Even though her sister had died of cancer, she didn't want to believe in this damn diagnosis. How could it be? She asked her husband a question for which there was no answer. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I'm perfectly happy in my personal life. My work is fine. After all, they write that this disease comes from stress, worries. She faltered. Clara's sister also considered herself a happy woman, but it happened as it happened. Ashley, you don't worry. Eric took her hand. Medicine doesn't stand still. While you heal, your body will fight, and the scientists, meanwhile, will think of a way to finally defeat the disease. Let's fight till the end. We'll beat it. Ashley believed her husband. Otherwise, how could she live? He had always been her support. And now she also felt that she was not alone in the face of the disease. Eric never gave her a reason not to trust him. Never once in his life failed in major matters and issues. All decisions were made together, in concert, so she threw herself into the fight of her life. Drank all possible medicines, used folk remedies, in time to lie down for routine treatment in the hospital. At the same time tried to stay awake, to look after herself. Before my eyes stood the image of a sick sister with faded eyes, waving her hand and eerily indifferent to her appearance. Ashley loved her husband and wanted to remain for him the same desirable and sweet little white girl she had always been. She believed that together they would conquer the disease. Eric was touchingly patient with her, stretching out the hard and dark days when the disease worsened. Weeks of remission came quickly as she took walks, watched movies, read books. Every minute she felt her husband's care, unfailing and unobtrusive. And also, there was always her beloved Marquise. She felt the mistress like no one else. Fluffy Friend did not remember the evil, because the owners always left her alone in the cat cattery when they left on a trip or went camping. But the cat forgave this to people because she was attached to them, and she had already developed an addiction to this mode of existence. She would lie down to her mistress, nestle herself on the sore spot and purr soothingly, stroking Marquise's fluffy fur. Ashley made plans. And when I'm well, thus began her dreamy evening with Eric. Of course, it wasn't easy for her husband. He had to keep up with work, communicate with the doctors treating his wife, organize all the appointments for home treatments, and groceries, cooking, cleaning. He had to take care of that too. Ashley was sometimes completely helpless, and when she was a little bit off, she felt so disgusted with earthly affairs that she wanted to turn her back to the wall and not see anyone. And again her favorite Marquise came to her aid. Probably those who consider their presence in the house healing are right. At any rate, on Ashley, the soft purr of her cozy creature had a healing effect, or, as happened more and more often, at least a calming effect. It wasn't like it had been at the beginning of her illness, when Ashley would burst into work on a good day. What about my boys? Did everything smell like tobacco smoke again, and Linda's not mopping the floors again? She's a mess in the bathroom. Calm down. My husband laughed. We don't have any irreplaceable people, but immediately cut down under her gaze and corrected himself. But there are unique ones. That's our Ashley Betty. All your assistant, of course, will not do as you. Experiences still a little, but in general copes. So don't worry. Rest and regain your strength. I just bought vitamins for you. And he would go to the kitchen, unpack the bags, and switch Ashley's attention to some special overseas fruit. Then, sitting her in a corner not far from him, he would prepare dinner. He realized how dreary it was for a sick person to be home alone all day, without much to do, and often still suffering from nausea and pain. So the first thing he did was to make sure they were in the same room and close to each other in the evenings. Ashley had been preparing a helper for herself for a long time. It was a young woman, Betty, from the local area, a widow with a small child. Because of the child, she was both needy and unable to work full-time, only studying. She was hired part-time, and Ashley soon became convinced that Betty was diligent in her attention to detail, and she began to trust her with more and more important cases. True, she didn't much like Betty's way of talking and loud, annoying laughter. Well, what can you do? It's a new generation. They are so educated and have no complexes, which is also considered good. It works quite well. And still at first Ashley was worried, not for her position, no, for the job, just for how they would manage without her there. But Eric was well aware of the situation in the office. He reassured her. You trained Betty yourself, and you know she's a smart girl, she's trying. So everything's all right with us, and the salary, and the comfort of the workplace. It would seem, what else is there? But recovery did not come. The periods of good health became less frequent and shorter, the exacerbations more frequent and longer. Ashley did not sleep well at night, and from the beginning of her illness, asked to be left alone in bed. Her husband moved into the next room without complaint for the night, leaving the door open to hear her if she needed anything. Then the need arose for him to work on the papers. When Ashley was well, he could sometimes stay late in his office. Ashley could walk home alone or go to a cafe with her friends, waiting for him to return for a late dinner. But now he was secluded in his room. So little by little, the spouses began to distance themselves from each other. The evenings became quiet. The conversations came to naught. What was there to discuss if they went nowhere together, saw nothing, talked to no one? 5 whole years had passed in such an environment. A saint couldn't stand to be around a sick person for so long. Eric, however, behaved as he always did, continued to care for his wife, and was unfailingly even-tempered and calm. Preoccupied with her own pain, Ashley never reflected on her husband's behavior, believing it to be as it should be. She took his labors for granted. Sick people are so often selfishly blind to other people's problems. Increasingly, she had to resort to sleeping pills and painkillers. Eric had long ago handled these himself masterfully, too, like a professional caregiver. Ashley had loved his big, warm hands since the old hikes. They were the skillful, strong hands of a masterful man, but there was a special, gentle strength to them. Or maybe it seemed that way to Ashley. Today he was administering an anesthetic to her, and after the injection the patient lay quietly, turning away as always to the wall, covering her eyelids, listening to what was going on outside. At this time in the kitchen, where her husband was clearing the table after dinner, his cell phone rang. Eric, in a muffled voice, started the conversation. It became clear who he was talking to, the woman who had joined the company in her, Ashley's, place when she became ill. The specifics of the job were so well known to Ashley that she could guess Eric's interlocutor by 2-3 phrases. Yes, it's Betty, of course, a business conversation. But suddenly, his tone changed, cooing, intimate. She knew? Come on, sweetheart. Eric spoke, muffled by his beautiful baritone. Everything will be all right, just a little patience. Tonight? Of course not. No, I can't. She's asleep for now, but she'll wake up soon, won't she? Almost shrieking, Eric immediately lowered his voice to a whisper. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Kisses. Ashley couldn't figure out what this conversation meant. But in general, everything is clear and understandable. Her husband and this rude young lady have a relationship. But is that how it works? How is that possible? It's her husband, her own, the only one, the first and the last. He's caring, he's attentive, he's perfect. Ashley didn't sleep a wink, her temples pounding. Caring, attentive, perfect. Pretending to be asleep until her husband retired to his room for the night. Then she gathered her strength, with great exertion, trying not to make noise, stole from the mezzanine suitcase, with which once in the happy days of the two of them, traveled abroad. Her husband was in the next bedroom, breathing evenly and calmly. She knew his habit, only put his head on the pillow, sleeps like a dead man. She gathered his things more calmly and put them neatly. She took the suitcase to the kitchen beforehand, while it was empty. She knew that she couldn't lift a full one and wouldn't carry it. She looked at the closet shelves again. That's it, I think, everything. I packed the essentials. I sat in the armchair until dawn, either in oblivion or in a half-slumber, but I had no strength to think about what was happening. The faithful Marquisa nestled at her feet. It was morning. I heard Eric get up, go to the bathroom, then into the bathroom. Ashley got up from her seat and went into the kitchen. She poured water into the kettle and lit the gas burner. You're not drinking tea today, she said, as if to herself, but it was addressed to her husband. He had just entered the kitchen, wiping his face and neck with a snow-white towel. Good morning. How did you sleep, little squirrel? Why are you up so early? He reached for her with a kiss, but Ashley pulled away and he almost tripped over the suitcase. What's this? Immediately his face began, before Ashley's eyes, to lose its features. It was very frightening to see. There was one man standing in front of her, and in half a minute there was another, completely lost, crumbling, a stranger. He understood everything. Go away, Ashley said calmly. I heard you talking. There's a child in there, Ashley, he said after a moment's silence. A son, he's 3 years old. Forgive me, I couldn't tell you. It would have been too cruel. Were you hoping I'd die and never find out? Asked Ashley in an alien voice. I'm sorry there's no way I could die. Then you'd be married. Go away. Eric silently picked up his suitcase and left. Ashley looked at him and wondered how this man who was so dear to her, was now suddenly a stranger. How could it be? She was in a sort of suspended state, in a stupor, unable not to cry, not to curse her lovers. She froze and then went to the window, then sat in the chair, staring thoughtlessly in front of her. I couldn't realize what had happened, and a day later I ended up in the hospital, in a very bad condition. Did you have some kind of stress? Asked the doctor, a nice dry woman, a little younger than Ashley herself. No. Dimly Ashley answered, though it was clear from her voice that yes, of course she had. This time the treatment was very hard and slow. An ambulance had been called by a neighbor. There was no one to take Marquise to the usual place. Worried about the cat, who was left without care and supervision for the first time, Ashley called her nephew. "William, try to come, please. I'm begging you, honey. The cat's all alone in there." I didn't have time to warn anyone. Ashley herself did not understand why now, after so many days of loneliness and patience, large tears rolled down her cheeks. Before, she had been like a dried-up pond with cracks in the bottom, dark, soulless, dried up. William was upset that his aunt was in the hospital again and promised to come soon. He was quite satisfied with the squeezed-in business trip when he asked in surprise where Eric was. His nephew had indeed arrived. He was to not only take care of his aunt, but also to be a thimble to listen to Ashley's difficult account of what had happened. "Aunt Ashley?" he said, hugging the thin woman. "You're strong. Do you remember how you took care of your mom? How you explained everything to her so well?" "I can't do that. But you realize you have to live, don't you?" "And Uncle Eric?" "Let him live once, maybe." "You're right." Ashley supported him warmly. "Let him live. As long as he's taken care of me, I should be grateful to him." "Don't you, William?" She looked inquiringly into the young man's eyes, but he averted his gaze. What could he say? How could he, to answer for a grown, strong man? Everyone makes his own choices. From that day on, the boy helped his aunt in every way he could. He came at her every call, took on all the cases that required walking, visiting all sorts of instances. He also communicated with doctors and delivered medicines. It was good that he was well regarded by his superiors at his workplace, where he worked for the second year after graduating from the institute. Realizing the need to travel, they let him go, gave him time off. Once William came to bring his aunt from the hospital and decided to clean up so that the apartment was at least clean. He was scrubbing the floors when the doorbell rang and Eric stood on the doorstep. "Hello, William," he said hello grimly, not showing surprise. "Hi." William was a little confused. "Don't you have a key?" "Yes, why not?" Eric pulled a rattling bunch out of his pocket. "It's just inconvenient, so I wanted to give it back to Ashley." "Come on in." William moved aside to make way. "I'm cleaning the floors because Aunt Ashley's being discharged tomorrow, so I thought I'd freshen up the air, so to speak." Eric held himself as stiffly as a guest. It was obvious he was uncomfortable, and the conversation was not going well. Meanwhile, William boiled the kettle, put cookies and butter on the table, and made tea. Having poured it into cups, he moved it to the guest and made an inviting gesture. "Well, let's drink tea." All his movements were practiced, taking care of his mother, gave the skills of housekeeping. Got to the lad. Thought Eric, he coughed embarrassedly. And here I am." The boy looked at him uncomprehendingly, but so bright and ingenuous was his look that Eric himself did not realize how he had talked about what was troubling him. "You can judge me, of course." He began. "Yes, I'm a traitor. Ashley's my only love, but it just so happens that this woman—" He hesitated, but he didn't call Betty by name. "She turned out to be pregnant, a casual affair, fleeting, but it kept me going. You see, she was silent, but she kept looking at me like that. And I was tired, I weakened. That's the way it came out." William listened to him silently, keeping his eyes down. When Eric sighed heavily and clutched his head with both hands resting on his knees. "And then my son was born, and that was it. I couldn't leave them. Now the son is 3 years old." They sat in silence. Then William said, "Uncle Eric, I'm not your judge. You've always helped me. But I know one thing for sure. Aunt Ashley would never leave you. 5, 10 years, all her life she would have been with you. I know she would." Eric almost whispered, "I know, which is why I don't apologize." He rose heavily from his chair and put his keys beside the cup, not touching the tea. Monica listened to Ashley and realized that she didn't want to be this old, this sick, this lonely. She already wanted to leave this dull, empty apartment, to start living somehow differently, to be light at heart, light in the house. Yet she sympathized with Ashley with all her heart and was ready to help her. And so the day came before the trip to the hospital. Ashley had warned her in advance, and Monica came in the evening with the express intention of taking the cat home with her. Ashley had also prepared in advance. "Monica, here's the carrier, Marquise is used to it, and here's the rest of the food. However, I haven't been out lately, so it's not much, but I think it's enough for a couple of days, and this is the most necessary. These are our Marquise's favorite toys." She put a ball, a rubber mouse, and a couple of other items next to it. The woman said goodbye to her pet for a long time, whispering affectionately in her ear, only she could hear the words. Then she let her go and Marquise silently climbed into the carrier. "Well then, we're off," said Monica, and finally, taking the carrier in one hand and the bag of things in the other, she walked toward the exit. "Goodbye, Ashley. Have a good day. I'll be sure to call you." Ashley nodded and turned back to the window, holding back tears. Outside the window, a cold fall rain was falling in unison with her mood. While Monica had been carrying Marquise home, she had gotten soaked. Waiting for the bus in the rain wasn't very pleasant either, so she decided to take the easy way out. Walked, still drying herself off. Her apartment was warm and cozy. As she let the cat out of the carrier, she said, "Welcome to your new home, Marquisa. Now you will be the mistress here. Keep order, catch mice. You remember the main thing here." She stroked the cat affectionately, let it down on the floor, and went about her business. She hung up her wet coat and scarf and put her shoes on the drying rack. Marquise sat by her things at first, then slowly began to settle in. She walked for a long time in her new home, looked in all corners. All this she did in silence. She slept on her cot, which she had given to Ashley, and from then on she slept on it only. In the morning, Monica went to work, poured food and water on her, and punished her. "Marquise, you stay for the mistress. Is that a deal? If anything, meow to me. Bye-bye." And she left. It took a while for the new resident to get used to the apartment and the landlady. Monica didn't know how Marquisa behaved during the day, alone in empty rooms. She left for her office early in the morning, returned in the evening. Always worried, how was Marquise without her? Did she long for her old home, for her original mistress? She was worried about the cat's health, but when she came back in the evening, she made sure that she had eaten a little. Not much, but enough not to starve or lose weight. She sighed, then put the litter tray away and took the white Marquise in her arms. "You're my goodest sweetheart. I know this is hard for you. You're like a flower that's been transplanted into different soil. Mommy didn't betray you, you know that. It's just the way it is, and I'll take care of you. Don't be sad, my dear. We'll be friends, okay?" The cat listened and was silent. It had never once raised its voice since it had moved into Monica's apartment. It was strange, confusing, and a little scary. Monica was worried, then decided to calm down and wait because the cat was healthy and did not show any signs of anxiety. "Why are you so silent?" she asked, stroking Marquise's soft fur. "Are you sad? I promise you that we will visit your mommy, Marquise. Don't be sad." Several times Monica called Ashley at the hospital, then sent pictures of Marquise. The woman was very grateful to her, but her voice grew quieter and quieter each time. Several months passed. Then one day close to spring, Monica's call was not answered, and the next day neither. Then a man answered the phone. "Hello, are you calling for Aunt Ashley? She's in the hospital." "It's her nephew." "William?" Monica almost shrieked. "This is Monica, a friend of hers. I know she's in the hospital. Is she sick?" "Hello, Monica." "Auntie has gotten worse. She's been unconscious for 2 days." William sounded depressed. "How long are you here for?" "Will you be with her?" Monica shifted from foot to foot excitedly. Suddenly she wanted to help Ashley very badly. "I've taken a vacation. Auntie has no one but me." William explained. How could he know that Monica would know about this detail of Ashley's biography? So Monica decided, "William, will you let me visit her?" "Why don't we lie to the doctors so they'll let me in?" "I'm not a relative, and I need to see her so badly to reassure her." "Well, let's try." William was a little confused by this pressure. The girl realized that arguments were necessary. "You see, I have Ashley's cat, Marquise. I'd like to calm her down, tell her about the cat, explain that everything is all right. Maybe it would make her feel better." "Oh, that's what it is." William rejoiced. "Are you the girl with the beautiful eyes and the kind heart? Aunt Ashley has told me all about you. Come tomorrow between 2 and 5, and I'll tell her you're my fiancé." Monica was embarrassed and confused at the same time. She hadn't expected such compliments, so she could only say, "Thank you, see you tomorrow." In the night, the girl woke up from the fact that in her head, from somewhere a vivid picture arose. In a bright room, she held in her hands a snow-white cat, as if the picture had formed. Yes, she must make her way to Ashley with Marquise. The drive to the hospital, with the cat in her bag, was easy, but at the hospital itself, Monica chickened out. She tried to get past the grenadier-looking janitor who sat on the walkway to the stairs leading to the bedside rooms, but she was wary. Though there were many visitors, she caught Monica's eye and shouted, because she apparently couldn't speak quietly. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" Room 255, Ashley's room." Monica got excited again. "Here's a pass." Thank God, the same William took care of the pass and called her in advance, warning her that she could get it there and there, otherwise the janitor wouldn't let her through. Groom. Monica grinned to herself. The Marquise did not let her down, neither dreaming nor thinking. Unaware of the zoo in her bag, the janitor nodded, and Monica started to go up to the right floor. Here was the right room. Opening the door quietly, Monica prepared to see Ashley's dead face, which was the only reason the reality didn't stun her. Ashley lay with her eyes closed, her mouth outlined, a thin line of bloodless lips, her breath moving the sheet on her chest almost imperceptibly. Had there been other patients in the ward, Monica would hardly have been able to recognize at once the mistress of the Marquesa, so changed was she, and the formerly thin and pale, now Ashley's face, had quite lost its individual features, had become as if a symbol, a sketch of a human face. A dream, Monica thought. This is my dream. The room, already painted white, was even brighter from the sun and the snow outside the window. It was a depersonalized, lifeless white, frightening in its perfection. It took some getting used to. Monica stood at the door for a moment, then slowly approached the patient's bed. Carefully she took the cat, which had made no sound so far, out of the bag and carefully placed it on Ashley's bed. The Marquise, without a glance at the foreign walls, at once lay down beside her mistress and began to lick her hands. Monica was astonished at this instant foundation. "My God!" she whispered in respectful horror. "Marquise, did you recognize her?" And then the cat screamed. The sound could not be called a meow. It was a wild cry, never heard before by Monica, as if the animal were in terrible pain. The Marquisa was bidding farewell to her mistress. Terrified by the heart-rending moans of Marquise, Monica grabbed the cat tightly in her arms and rushed out of the room, then back down the corridor, up the stairs to the exit, leaving behind her bewilderment, turmoil, and horror. She could not see how the orderlies and nurses ran to the room of the patient. Patients who could move independently to find the source of the terrible howling, paralyzing, and inspiring animal terror. But what she knew for certain was that Ashley had stopped breathing that very night, not long after she and Marquise had fled the hospital. And Monica was finally convinced that she had been right to let the two loving souls, human and feline, say goodbye to each other. Then came the funeral. There was only a small handful of mourners at the funeral ceremony, consisting of neighbors and a few former co-workers of the deceased. A young man in his early 30s stood close to the coffin, his face expressing genuine grief. Monica guessed that it was William. As they began to disperse, Monica approached him to introduce herself and offer her condolences. "I'm sorry to have to meet you under such sad circumstances," she said. "Your aunt loved you very much." "Thank you, Monica," he said, shaking her hand with a light, musician-like motion. "It was a great comfort to Aunt Ashley that you agreed to take care of her cat. She said she was completely at peace now." "Oh, really?" Monica was embarrassed. "I'm fine with the Marquisa. Would you let me visit her?" asked William. "Yes, of course." Monica explained how to get to her from Ashley's house, where William was to stay for the first time, and they said goodbye. At home, Monica sat for a long time without doing or thinking. The cat was already used to meeting her mistress at the door and waited patiently for her to separate. The girl went to the armchair, took Marquise in her arms. She murmured some quiet words, then faintly hummed some forgotten songs that suddenly came to mind. Such 5 minutes in the evenings became their custom. Marquise received the warmth of human hands, listened with pleasure to the soft female voice. Monica relaxed, stroking the white smoothness of the cat's back, and listened to the purring of the animal. "Here we are, Marquise, just the two of us," Monica told me quietly. "Your mother has left us, but don't be sad for her. She has calmed down now, she is well, she is not in pain, and you and I will remember her with a kind word." A few days passed after Ashley's funeral and William called. Monica invited him to visit, remembering his request to visit Marquise. In the evening she hastily set the tea table. There was no need to clean up for her guest. Monica and Marquise's house was always in perfect order, as if in the absence of her mistress, the cat had been diligently keeping it clean and cozy. William came at the agreed time. He brought Marquise a large bag of cat treats and toys. Monica immediately at the entrance handed a luxurious bouquet of fragrant lilies, and she immediately placed the fragrant flowers in the middle of the table. The cat treated the generous gifts favorably, even tried the new balls with regal strokes of her paw. Then it settled down in its usual place and looked at the couple talking at the table with closed eyes and purred contentedly. Meanwhile, William took out a bottle of Prosecco. "Monica, do you have a corkscrew?" "Oh, I don't have one. I've never needed one." The hostess was confused. She couldn't tell her that she had been living alone all these years without merry company. Frankly speaking, her evenings were no different from the evenings of an old pensioner, and meanwhile at work, she was quite sociable and was quite attractive. "Oh no," said William resolutely. The straight line would be drawn, problem solved. The bottle must be opened and drunk. I can't afford any weakness today. How can I not drink good wine with such a beautiful woman on my first meeting? Monica, lively and cheerful, carried more and more tools. Try a fork, and here's a knife. Oh, wait, I have a screwdriver. And she, giggling, dragged the most valuable, in her opinion, tool that could only exist in the house of an old bachelor. Laughing at her own dexterity, William managed to open the bottle with the tools at hand. Monica brought glasses. The first toast was to acquaintance. Both liked the wine. Then they drank, remembering the departed Ashley, without clinking glasses. Aunt Ashley was only 48, a little less than Mom. William said sadly, "She was my mom for the last few years. She called every day, sent me money, even bought me and Uncle Eric clothes without me. Aunt Ashley used to guess my size and my tastes." "Oh, Eric, was he at the funeral?" Monica asked. "No, I didn't call him. But their mutual co-workers said he was away with the baby just these days for some kind of baby checkup. You know, Monica, Ashley's aunt, didn't say anything about him at the end of his illness, but I think she forgave him. She loved him very much and thought, I guess, that he deserved such happiness, a son, at least in his old age. And I guess I'm a maximalist. I can't forgive Uncle Eric. I talk to him whenever I get the chance, even understand to some extent his deed. But you know, Aunt Ashley, she was all straight and honest, no niggles anywhere, no corner of the secret. She should have been happy, from beginning to end. But it's that damn disease. I'm so sorry we met her so late," answered Monica. "I always dreamed of having a friend, Ashley older. The more I was good with her." "Oh, you just didn't see her young, Monica. She was all fire and brimstone, lighting everybody up. She was bright, you know. Uncle Eric always called her white for a reason. Still, she had a wonderful life, didn't she?" Monica looked up at him. "And from what you remember, she gave herself to life to the full." "That's great, but I always wondered if she was alone. She had friends, comrades from way back. She remembered them so warmly, I didn't feel comfortable asking about it. It was her choice, Monica. Aunt Ashley, a person of great dignity." William spoke of Ashley as if she were alive. When she got sick, she deleted herself from all social media. She even stopped answering her phone. She was determined that she would not overshadow other people's lives. Let her friends not see her helpless, weak, balding after chemo. She had to make an exception for me. We've always been very close. How could she do without support? Physically, it was impossible. William confirmed that he would be selling the apartment in 6 months. Legally, he was only entitled to it after that time, but today they felt so good that they didn't want to talk about business or anything sad anymore. William and Monica sat up until almost dawn. It seemed to both of them that they had known each other for a very long time. It was amazing how much they had in common: movies, favorite songs, homes, even writers and poets they liked the same. Saying goodbye, William suddenly kissed Monica on the cheek. In the afternoon, having guests during his lunch break, he called her again. "Monica, I've been urgently summoned to work. I'm leaving tonight, and I was so looking forward to seeing you today. What can I do?" He said pitifully, "So let me come and see you off." Monica blurted out without thinking, and she was surprised at her own determination. William was delighted. "Really? I wouldn't dream of it. Come straight from work to my Aunt Ashley's apartment. You and I will have dinner together somewhere, and then we'll go to the train station." It was a very short evening, but just as wonderful as the last. A light dinner, a farewell at the train station, and Monica was home. Caring William himself called and paid for a cab, so that the girl was not alone at night on the deserted streets. The farewell kiss made Monica's head spin. "Marquise, what shall I do?" said she to her shaggy-haired friend. "I like him so much. How can I live alone now, Marquise?" Marquise purred reproachfully in her arms, indignant. "You have me. You're not alone." Monica's life was now filled with a great bright feeling. She happily got up in the early morning, squeezed her cat, ran to work, forgetting all about her limp. By the way, she used to exaggerate her handicap. So Monica decided, looking at herself again and again in the big mirror in the hallway. Even though William was not around, she still expressed and fancied herself every day. She had to look her best every minute now, and he called more than once a day, and their conversations were full of those hints, those innuendos that truly bring two people together. They developed a shared life there in the cloudy, ephemeral space that gives air to existence. Monica pictured William beside her. Yes, he is not handsome, but he is so good with his gorgeous smile, his quick, dexterous movements. And most importantly, he treats her so carefully, as if she were made of something beatable, alert to all her movements. One of the sunny June days, the doorbell rang. Monica, in a kerchief and an old robe, who was not expecting anyone, came to open the door to the sudden guest. "William?" Monica was both bewildered and delighted. "And here I am." She looked around the room, which was chaotic as usual. Monica decided to change the wallpaper and freshen things up. In the back of her mind, she was waiting for William to arrive, for it would soon be 6 months since Ashley's death, and he would have to inherit the apartment. "I'll make something for breakfast." She hurried after the first greetings. "No, Monica, I'm not going to let you do anything on the day I arrive. Get dressed, we're going to a nice place." They left everything in the same disheveled state and went to smoke at a cafe owned by an old acquaintance of William's. Juicy steaks, sparkling wine, fruit. Monica enjoyed it all and marveled at how much pleasantness and pleasure there was in life. And why did she think it wasn't all for her? William had opened her little joys, but he had also become her great joy. "Do you like it?" he asked Monica lovingly, looking into her face. Chewing the grapes, Monica only mooed amusedly, showing that she was at the height of her pleasure. William's arrival had a practical purpose. He was going to sort out the paperwork. Monica's help with the legal matters would be of great help to him. After lunch, they worked on the paperwork and made a plan to sell Ashley's apartment. "Honey, you may be wondering why I don't want to move in there myself and live next door to you," William asked softly, removing a curl of hair from Monica's neck. The girl was embarrassed. She had actually hoped in her heart that he would do just that, and now she suddenly pictured him in the empty and droning rooms where Ashley had spent so many sorrowful and agonizing months waiting to die. Hopelessness, everything in those walls was written by her. Sterile to the point of creepiness, the apartment was lifeless, and despite the light from the large windows, eerie. The sensation was so clear that she didn't realize she'd cried out. "No, no, William, don't live there." He understood her impulse, for that was why he did not think of Ashley's dwelling as his own. "No, Monica, we will live very differently. I'll do everything for you as you wish only. What?" Monica was scared, but it would be worth your while to begin. He paused, frowning, pretending to laugh at her confusion. "Marry me." Monica laughed, waving her arms, and then he was spinning her around the room, and she was laughing, wrapping her arms around his neck. The scraps of the old wallpaper also flew up into the air, and this strange salute was happening of its own accord in honor of their happy future union. On the window, away from this outrage, sat a regal white cat and condescendingly tweaked its whiskers. What children these people are, after all. After a few months, the young people bought a wonderful house and moved away from the noisy city. Every evening, Monica made tea in the gazebo near the house. William turned on the speakers, and the couple listened to music. The gorgeous Marquise always lay in her new owner's arms and purred peacefully.